Ready.
Who else could it be but me, your man, Louie Tee, here with the Commanders Kings. You already know what it is. Rio Robinson from Rambling with Rio. Obviously,
Yes,
Rico from Street Scores. And, of course, the real Ed Oliver. My guy, Ed, holding it down. Kings. Fellas. What an off season it has been. Hell, just last week was one hell of a week, right? I mean, we knew this was going to be one of the biggest off seasons in franchise history. We were really excited about what the future was going to hold. I don't think we could have imagined how things were going to go. I want to start. I'm so excited about tonight's show because I'm so looking forward to hearing from all of y'all, but more importantly, I want to hear from you guys about the emotions that you were going through as everything was happening, because I know I was going crazy when a lot of this stuff was happening, right? So I want to go back to the beginning. Okay, so let's start with the hiring of Adam Peters, right? I'm assuming, and I shouldn't do this, I don't like to do this, but I think I feel good assuming that we were all good with that hire, right? We all felt excellent about that, right? So we don't even need to waste any time with that. That was slam dunk hire. We all felt great about it. And then the madness ensued after that, right? So I want to start with this, with the group, and you don't have to elaborate on any of this right now. I just want your top two candidates going into the playoffs, okay, for head coach. You don't have to elaborate. Just give me your top two candidates heading into the postseason. Start with you, Rio. Who were your top two candidates?
Oh, man, it seems like an easy answer, but Ben Johnson, sizable gap, Mike McDonald / Bobby Slowick. That was my two big three going into the coaching search, and boy, was it a saga.
Oh, was it ever? Ed, your two top candidates.
What? Mine was Ben Johnson and Bobby Slowick.
Rico.
Yes, sir. Bobby Slowick and Ben Johnson, even though Georgia Bulldog, Mike McDonald, but Bobby Slowick, Ben Johnson.
Oh, my God. Mine was Ben Johnson, sizable gap, and then Ben Johnson again. Okay?
Right.
so
I understand.
Clearly, we were mostly thinking offensive-minded coach. We looked at the situation 100%. And we said, look, we got to go get us an offensive-minded dude. Ben Johnson was at the top or near the top of all of our lists. I think most of us would have been okay with Bobby Slowick, even though he lacked the type of experience that we probably were looking for. McDonald, again, high on probably all of our lists. So walk me through that Monday, okay? So we get through the NFC Championship game. Both the Ravens and Lions lose, okay, to set the table. Everybody knows how this went. But we had interviews set up with both of the Ravens interviewees, Weaver and McDonald, on Monday. And then Tuesday, we were supposed to be meeting with the two Detroit Lion candidates. So walk me through how you were feeling going into that Tuesday meeting. And they had pushed Dan Quinn back. We weren't even, nobody was even thinking about Dan Quinn. His interview got canceled, pushed back rather, from the week prior. It was like, whatever, man. Who cares about Dan Quinn's interview, right? Like, we were all worried about the Detroit interviews. So I want to start with Ed. Okay. Walk me through Tuesday. So I'm gonna just say this. I was peacefully sleeping. Okay. Peacefully sleeping. And I'm waiting for news, but I'm not thinking anything's gonna happen on Tuesday. We're still meeting with candidates. And I wake up to my phone going bananas. Yep. This is how I found out that Ben Johnson had taken himself out of the candidacy for head coach. What about you? Walk me through your emotions going through that whole process, that Tuesday into Wednesday, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, so it was so funny because I think it was Nikki Javala. She took a picture of Dan Quinn on the plane, like getting on the plane, like right after the interview.
Yes.
And that looked like Dan Quinn was not going to get on the job because they were like, oh, they put him on a commercial flight. They didn't even put him on a jet. You know, they're taking pictures. He's out there with normal people. You know,
Right,
people
right.
you know, commercial. Yeah, coach taking a coach flight back to Dallas or wherever he was coming from. So I was like, yeah, he's not getting it. Then I got the notification saying that Ben Johnson wasn't coming here, that he was out of the running, you know. And then I know we'll probably talk about what Shefty had to say about Ben Johnson, all the leaks and all the that they're throwing at each other right now. All the stuff is coming out. But yeah, I was like, after that, then that domino fell. Then I think Bobby Slowick said he was going back to the Texans, or they gave him an extension or something like that. They gave him a raise. And then it was just Mike McDonald.
Right.
Then the Seahawks flew him back out
the next day, the very next day after their first one.
In the morning, I was like,
that's done. Yeah, that was a done deal.
He's hired, and it's like, where are we gonna go from here? Either Dan Quinn or Weaver or Aaron Glenn. I'm like,
yeah,
it's all defensive. It's defensive minded guys from here right now. So it's like Ben Johnson's gone. All the offensive guys are going.
Of those three you just named, which one were you going to be the most comfortable with had they hired them?
It actually was Dan Quinn.
Okay.
And Anthony Weaver was intriguing because he's unknown. And I know we didn't want a retread. And even though we've seen some retreads come back and do well.
Yeah.
But I was intrigued by Anthony Weaver. Like there was one interview he had. There was like a speech he had where he was like, okay, yeah, I think we can ride with this guy and see what he can do.
Yeah.
You know, he's a young guy, kind of innovative.
He said the words. He said the aligned vision words.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It was that interview. And I was like, okay, let's see what we can do. But I was like, you know what, Dan Quinn, Dallas defense improved. He's a leader, the cliche leader of men. And then we saw the memes with Ron's face on his face and Photoshop and stuff. I was like, man, here we go again. But I was like, Dan Quinn's a respectable hire. You can't say it's not respectable. So I was like, all right, if it's Dan Quinn, it is what it is. At least we got a real GM here.
Rico, walk me through that Tuesday and then into the rest of that search on to Thursday.
Well, just like you, I was thinking that day I was good. I left the house. I was like, okay, you know, maybe I should stay home if I may need to do a video, but we still got more interviews to do. We still got to talk to Ben Johnson. I'm thinking, okay, schedule cleared up. I don't have to worry until some major news breaking maybe tonight.
Right.
And then next thing you know, the whole internet just breaks loose. I mean, it's just one thing after another. People are panicking. People are starting to doubt Adam Peters. Like, was Adam Peters even the right guy? He can't even get his head coach and things like that. It was chaos. So then, of course, we got down to Mike McDonald and Dan Quinn. You know, I was leaning more so towards the Mike McDonald, the younger guy, the defensive-minded guy, did a great job with Michigan, and you could argue he implemented with that defense that they just won a national championship with, did a great job with the Ravens. But even back then, even before we got down to Dan Quinn basically only available, a lot of us, not just me, a lot of us were saying that with his name around the league, his word is long, his name is good. He could be the type to potentially put together a great staff, even as much as we don't like him. Maybe, you know, when you're looking at it from a glass half full, you're like, we got rejected by Ben Johnson. We got rejected from these other guys. What's the positives in this last guy we potentially have available? And those were some of the things we were starting to say out there. And I'm pretty sure we're going to dive into it. But that's what started to convince myself that this Dan Quinn thing can work as long as we hit on offensive coordinator. And he did it before with Kyle Shanahan. He's put together great stats before. Let's see how it goes. And then now we are where we are.
Rio, talk to me.
Oh man, you know, I was team Ben Johnson about a year ago. Like I'm probably the biggest cheerleader in the Ben Johnson to DC. I'm probably a bigger cheerleader than that man than his wife. I've studied, I've watched every piece of content, interview, press conference, anything the Lions put him on camera on, I watched it.
Yeah.
So I had it in the bag, him to DC.
Yeah.
I pre-recorded a Ben Johnson that was hired as the head coach video. My father had a Detroit Lions old varsity jacket lying around. I put it on in the video, dog.
That's in the lost tapes now, man. We have to release that one. You're gonna have to release
channel members only. Channel members only.
I'm gonna have to release it as a blue. I had a Tar Heels hat on and I had a Lions jacket on.
No, Rio.
I gloated for 20 minutes about how we got our guy. We got the top GM and we got the top head coach. we get to Tuesday morning. I work overnights now. So I sleep during the morning and I wake up in the afternoon sometime. I woke up because I usually put my phone on Do Not Disturb, but today was a big day. I kept the ringer on. I woke up because I got nonstop DMs on Twitter and on Instagram, and our group chat had like 69 messages in it. And I was like, what the hell is happening?
Right.
And the last message said, yo, Rio's going to be sick to his stomach when he wakes up. And then I scrolled up like, how could I be sick? Did they hire somebody? They're on their way to Detroit.
That's right.
Last thing I seen before I went to sleep was Dan Quinn looking like he didn't get a job at the airport because Nikki Jabwala posted it.
Yeah.
And the first thing I see when I wake up is Dan Johnson decided to stay in Detroit, and he informed us via text, like not the Ben Johnson I've got to know, even though I don't know him, not the Ben Johnson that I've fantasized about a Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan future with here in DC. I didn't expect him to pull some beta male, bitch made punk ass move and decide to text us in the air that he decided to stay in Detroit. He told Amon-Ra St. Brown before he told us of his decision. So that hurt. And then you stack on top of it, Bobby Slowick is staying in Houston. So you add those two, we got a left-right good night, and then Mike McDonald drop kicks us into our grave as he goes to get introduced in Seattle. You get to watch this kumbaya-ass video of Mike McDonald arriving at the facility, and every person in like a 5-mile radius was there in the building. Oh my God, welcome to Seattle. And then over the next 24 hours, I convinced myself that Anthony Weaver was Mike Tomlin 2.0. I convinced myself that we're going to get us one, just like they were supposed to hire Russ Grimm. They pivoted to Mike Tomlin. He's a culture changer. He said the words, aligned vision. And then we wake up. It felt like Christmas morning for a man. A man, for whatever reason, is not allowed extravagant gifts. You wake up and you expect something fly, but your kids get you some shirts and some socks and some drawers. It felt like getting drawers for Christmas because it was so anticlimactic how we got to that point. It felt like if he was going to be the guy, we should have did that weeks ago. And then we have the Dan Quinn was hired cycle. Within 24 hours, I'm trying to convince myself of it. Then a week later, I'm already bought into it. So it's a roller coaster of emotions, man.
Yes. Look, I was watching your video. And I was like, we had to send Dan the "Hey big head" text. Like, you up? Hey big head. Like, there was no way he was 1, 2, or 3. Like, people are trying to convince us, like, after the fact, he was potentially number 1 on the list, right? And look, he may have ultimately gotten a job because all the things that have come out about, you know, Ben Johnson over the last week or so, and I knew this was going to happen once he backed out, right? I still got none but the utmost respect for him as a play caller, but as a man, like, it took a hit for me because of how he went about it. And look, you're entitled to whatever decision you want to make, right? Like, if you feel like being in Detroit right now is the best situation, maybe you're not ready to be a head coach. Maybe these opportunities didn't speak to you. What I've heard this, I can't confirm it, but he wanted to work with Justin Herbert with the Chargers, right? He wanted an established quarterback. I think working with Jared Goff kind of spoiled him a bit, where he goes, I don't think I really want to deal with the growing pains that come with working with a young quarterback. And that's why Seattle might have made a little bit of sense for him with Geno Smith, but here it definitely didn't speak to him because we were drafting a young guy and he was going to have to develop that young quarterback. And, you know, you start hearing all the things about, you know, and I said it in the moment, like, he's a beta, right? Like, he's not an alpha, because if you're a coach, there's something, you know, as an athlete, athletic arrogance, right? Where you feel like, look, I can change it, right? Like, I can get it done. I'm that guy. I'm him. I'm that dude. And so he turned down opportunities to be a head coach last year. Okay, fine. I get that. That was the first time you getting it done. You wanted to come back, and the jobs were trash last year, right? So I got it. This year, I felt like there were so many opportunities out there. And for him to just say, nah, I'm good again, I'm going back to Detroit, felt like kind of a gut punch. But it got worse because as you're sitting there, you know, it was funny, the game the fans play, right? And I separate myself because it felt like we waited on him, but we didn't, right? Because in my mind, I told myself, well, it don't matter if he wasn't going to be the head coach. We still were waiting on Mike McDonald. We still were waiting on Anthony Weaver. We still were waiting on Aaron Glenn. But I'm like, no, we weren't waiting on them dudes for real.
The mental gymnastics.
Right. That's the stuff we do to ourselves, right? Like we weren't waiting on them guys. We was waiting on Ben Johnson, right? And so I'm like, man, waiting this long. And then, you know, the part that felt the worst, even though there was really no panic with our group, right? There was no panic with Josh Harris. There was no panic with Adam Peters. They didn't panic. We panicked as fans. Like, everybody's got a coach except us. You're looking around and like, Seattle hired Mike McDonald.
We don't team at the Senior Bowl coachless.
Right? Like, oh my God, what is going on? And so speak to me now. We're going to start with Rico. Speak to me about that little gap, right? Seattle hires Mike McDonald. And we're just kind of sitting there stuck in limbo with no coach because they hired him on Wednesday morning. We woke up to that information that he was flying out to Seattle. Anybody that could put 2 and 2 together and get 4 understood with that flight. If he just met with him yesterday in Baltimore and now he's being flown out to Seattle, everybody knew what that was about, right? So at that point, Johnson's out of the mix, Slowick's out of the mix, now McDonald's out of the mix. The fan base is going nuts at this point. And they were going nuts so badly, I did a video that said, brace yourself for Dan Quinn, right? Because I saw where it was going. Talk to me about the emotions of that Wednesday and waiting to find out who the next head coach. Because one thing I can't say about this group is they've been tight-lipped. Nothing has really gotten out that they didn't want out. So we had no idea what they were going to do. We were just sitting there like, what the hell is going on? Talk to me about that gap between Wednesday morning, Seattle's hire, and then waiting all the way until like Thursday afternoon or so when we found out about Dan Quinn.
Man, I mean, my emotions, of course, was just trying to convince myself that all 3 could have been the guy. Like, again, like y'all said with Anthony Weaver, he said all of the right things in that little minute 30-second clip. I'm sold. We can make that work. Like Rio said, maybe the Knights Mike Tomlin or something like that. Then you got Aaron Glenn, and you're looking, well, I mean, Ben Johnson just denied us a positive on Aaron Glenn's side that's a negative to Ben Johnson. You could argue that Aaron Glenn won that Rams game because you could argue that Raheem Morris got the better of Ben Johnson. You're doing all of these calculations. Like maybe actually Aaron Glenn was really the secret sauce behind what the Lions had going on.
Yeah, we're sick. We're all sick.
You gotta do what you gotta do, man.
Right.
You gotta find a way to smile.
Hey,
gotta find a way. And
that's some nasty work.
And then Dan Quinn is, of course, like, I mean, he went to a Super Bowl. And again, like a lot of us were saying, I mean, he managed to get Kyle Shanahan after he had a bad season with the Browns. Maybe he could find an offensive coordinator. At this time, I didn't even think Kliff Kingsbury was even like a thought. He was not on my radar. I can honestly admit I had no idea that was even a thing we would look to. I was starting to look at maybe Brian Johnson. We were talking about like, well, if we get Dan Quinn, can we maybe still can we get Adam Peters to get Clint Kubiak for us or something like that? Like, it was crazy trying to rationalize, well, if we get this guy, we can look at it this positive way. We get this guy, look at it this way. No matter what, though, we were just trying to convince ourselves to just wake up every morning with a smile as a Burgundy and Gold fan. And us as, content creators, we're selling people like, this is the year to get excited. We got Adam Peters. And for it to get to this point in the coaching staff, we don't want to, show people like, oh, we're right back to where we started.
Right.
So we had to do what we had to do, man.
It was a lot of that though, man. You should have seen how many fans were throwing Adam Peters and Josh Harris under the bus.
The Adam Peters hate is crazy.
Oh,
that's
my
crazy.
God.
Crazy.
Talk to me, Rio. Talk to me about that little period, that Wednesday, waiting until Thursday, us being the only team and all the talking heads talking about how crazy we look and how we botched the whole process. Talk to me about your emotions and even dealing with some of the fans that were probably losing their damn minds at that time.
As content creators, it's crazy because we have a platform and we have to try to keep the fans somewhat medium.
That's right.
But I'm an emotional person, so I lean on emotion. At that stage, I was somewhere in between the grief process of denial and acceptance. So I was talking crazy on Ben Johnson's name.
Yeah.
Like I was mad.
Yeah.
And also I tried to sell myself that Anthony Weaver was the diamond in the rough of this entire coaching search, and he's the guy we've been waiting for. There was a reason why we interviewed him first. It is mental gymnastics. We are a sick group as Washington fans. We do everything we can to try to dictate the narrative, control the narrative, and believe the narrative that we concoct ourselves. So, but it was kind of like the movie 500 Days of Summer. They had a double screen. One said expectations, one said reality. My brain was already programmed that Dan Quinn was getting the job. But I was trying to speak on a reality that I knew wasn't going to happen, saying it's got to be Anthony Weaver. I knew it was Dan Quinn already after McDonald got the job. We knew where this was headed. So where you're at in the process, it's like the girl of your dreams just texted you and broke up with you, and you now have to go back to your DMs to find that girl you knew from back in the day that will ride or die for you. She don't play about you. You got to go hit her back like, you still interested? Because I'm here. So it's a whirlwind of emotions, but we're a week later. I got my hat to the back. I'm in DQ mode already. I'm already sold on the process. So you already know.
Let's get it.
Bro.
Ed, talk to me. That period. Wednesday, Seahawks make the hire, and we're just sitting there twiddling our thumbs until Thursday. Talk to me about those emotions in that little period there, and dealing with the fans and everything going crazy.
Yeah, it was getting real dark, man. And then it turned into comedy because everybody was saying Billy Baker from All America was going to be the coach. Everybody was like, I'm going to suit up. I'm going to put the headset on. I'm going to be the coach. So everybody was making it into a joke. But no, I mean, like when I saw you said brace yourself in the live, that was the caption or the thumbnail. I was like, yeah, it's going to be Dan Quinn, man. Yeah. Because you got to think about it this way too. Like Adam Peters in his presser, he was like, he wants a leader. And when he said it, I remember that. I was like, he wants a leader. You're going to get a leader in Dan Quinn. And I know it's the cliche leader of men and all that, but I knew we were going to get Dan Quinn. I knew that's what was going to happen. I did have a slight feeling and it was going to be Anthony Weaver, but I didn't want Aaron Glenn. Aaron Glenn was on the bottom of my list. That was the last guy that I wanted. I didn't want him involved at all. No disrespect to him. I think in the future he may be a good head coach. Yeah. But looking at the Lions defense, they gave up a lot of yards during the season. They had some good moments, but I was like, it's going to be Dan Quinn. I didn't want Aaron Glenn.
He was at the bottom.
I feel like when they got the text, I don't even know if they wanted to keep flying out there.
They really probably did.
They found out on Twitter first. They found out on Twitter before the text came through.
That's right.
Yeah.
They found out like us.
They really, I mean, they were already in mid-flight. So in order to save face, you're like, hey, we ain't even tripping. We still got to go see Aaron Glenn, right? But had he let them know beforehand, they might have been like, hey, Aaron, you want to do this on Zoom? Because we can do this on Zoom.
I would love to know the mood of the plane when they got the text. I want to know how many F-bombs were dropped on that plane.
Oh, I know Magic. Magic was probably pissed. If Magic was on that plane, I know Magic. Especially since the basketball comment came out too, I know Magic probably.
He was steaming like
Magic, the king of Michigan, bro. He was about to pull out all the stops when we pulled up.
So we get Dan Quinn. We've already mentally prepared ourselves, I think, in our own different ways. We had already kind of prepared ourselves for what was happening. So then we get the hire of Dan Quinn. You convince yourself, all right, I'm going to give it a shot, which is the right thing, right? Convince yourself, okay, let's see what's going on here. But then I think a lot of us said, all right, the next hire, which is the offensive coordinator, is going to be massive, right? So now I want to know what your emotions were when we're cycling through these OCs, right? Because there's Chip Kelly. Brian Johnson was rumored. And, I'm going to tell you what, and a lot of viewers can attest to this, and I told them I'm nervous as shit because EB is still in the building. And I'm like, he can't be here when we start this shit over. He can't be here. So walk me through the emotions of the OC search, because I knew the NFL wanted everybody to get their coaching search out of the way and done before Super Bowl week. They really didn't want anybody stepping on the toes of Super Bowl week. We saw the Raiders, after they had to pivot from Kliff Kingsbury, immediately make a hire with their OC, and we followed suit on. I mean, news never comes out in the NFL on Sundays. That's not how this thing works. Nope. So to have that happen on a Sunday tells you that everybody was trying to kind of fit that imaginary timeline that the NFL set. So now we got our coach on Thursday, and we go all the way until Sunday before we make our first hire for offensive coordinator. Walk me through the emotions of that, and all of the candidates were coming up and how you were feeling as all those candidates. Remember, Kliff Kingsbury was already supposed to be going to Vegas. He wasn't even in the mix, right? So that wasn't even somebody we could consider. We were hearing more about Chip Kelly than we were Kliff Kingsbury, right? So Rio, walk us through from that time of hearing Dan Quinn being the next coach of the Commanders to Sunday evening, finding out that our next offensive coordinator is going to be Kliff Kingsbury.
First thought was, if it was going to be Dan Quinn, I wish we did it a while ago. I wish we would have fulfilled the Rooney so we could have made this hire, because Shane Waldron's off the board to Chicago and Kliff Kingsbury just went off the board to the Raiders. Like, we couldn't have made this hire like a 24 hour. I wish it could have been done already, because Kliff Kingsbury is the first name I'm thinking about. And then everybody's saying Dan Quinn is locked in on Chip Kelly. If he gets a head coaching job, he already put the word out. So I spent the next 36 hours watching Eagles cut-ups, watching UCLA cut-ups, and selling me how Chip Kelly's redemption in the NFL would be a good idea. Maybe he's just better being a play caller than being a head coach, because he tore that roster up before a good little minute. He had the NFL fooled. They couldn't figure out what he was doing. His pace and space offense was electric. I remember what they did to us the first game of RG3's second year, when they came down here and embarrassed us on national TV in the first game in the All-In for Week 1 Bowl. And I remember that offense specifically. So then I saw that we were interviewing Brian Johnson. Brian Johnson, as a play caller, is the embodiment of Eric Bieniemy. He's 36-year-old EB. And that's what Eagles fans, that's what Eagles media, and that's what everybody said. Like, hell no, you don't want him calling plays. That's not what I want developing my young quarterback. And I'm like, where are we going with this? EB's still here. I'm sitting here like, there's not a chance in this world that EB is still on staff going forward. It doesn't make any sense. Like, I don't see why they would do that. And then the wrinkle in the mix was Kliff Kingsbury pulls out of the Raiders job. At that point, I felt relieved. I felt content. We are definitely getting this guy at this point. He's clearly the best play caller available for our offensive coordinator job. And once the rumors started connecting the dots, Washington hit him up. Someone said Magic Johnson pulled the stuff. They not getting a text again to tell them it's not happening. They made Kliff Kingsbury do the same thing that Ben Johnson did to us, to the Las Vegas Raiders. They made it about a contract dispute. It can't be because money, because the Cardinals are paying him through 2027. So his bag is right. His bag is righteous. He's good on that side. It had to be Kliff Kingsbury. We get the news on the Sunday. I was already convinced by then. I'm good. I feel good about the situation. Mind immediately went to selling myself on another dream, and that Kliff Kingsbury is the symmetry that aligns us with Caleb Williams coming here. And my brain's already there. So that's where the emotions went during the OC process.
Ed, talk to me about that process for you.
Yeah, Chip was definitely a surprising one. Now, he did have some good years with the Eagles. You think about the bad years, and then the Niners. I forgot that he coached the Niners. He went 2-14 and got fired up
because it was bad. That's why you forgot.
Yeah, I really forgot about that.
He hopes we forgot.
Yeah, I know. And then, you do a little bit more research on him. You're like, okay, he had some good seasons. Like, the offense was high powered. They went 10-6 twice. And then you look at UCLA, what he did with Dorian Thompson-Robinson. He helped him look like a solid, quarterback prospect coming out of UCLA. So you saw some good things from Chip Kelly. So I was like, okay, yeah, maybe we can make this work. The run game, he had the run game humming with the Eagles too. We want to see us run the football more with B-Rob, get some more guys involved doing that, get Terry more involved. So I was like, okay, maybe we can make this work. I was trying to be optimistic with Chip Kelly. And then Kliff came out of nowhere. I do feel like, I know the contract negotiations fell through, but I do feel like Kliff might have seen that he saw that Dan got the job, because Dan was like, hey, they had a relationship before, they rubbed elbows before, they talked and whatnot, they had a good conversation. So I feel like some of that was that Dan Quinn got the job. I feel like Kliff might have felt that way. And like you said, the Caleb thing, I don't think we're going to get Caleb. So I'm not getting my hopes up. Yeah. I really don't think that's going to happen. But Rio, I'm rooting for you. I hope it does. But if it happens, it happens. I don't think it will, but there is a connection. There's a little smoke and fire there. So we'll see what happens with that. But I really like the hire with Kliff because he's worked with college quarterbacks, Pat Mahomes, a lot of guys that he's worked with, young quarterbacks. Kyler Murray, it didn't work out at the end, but still, Kyler Murray had some good seasons too. So I thought Kliff was a good hire. Brian Johnson was definitely the bottom of the list for me. And then EB, he just respectfully said in the press conference, hey, he's a part of the brotherhood. I'm rooting for him, but he's not gonna bring him back. And then they said that he fired him. He didn't really fire him. I mean, technically,
I thought that was a terrible way of wording that. Like,
right.
We're not going to be working together here.
Yeah. He said he likes to do, but the crazy thing is he brought back Tavita Pritchard. That news just came out. So it's like, you don't bring back EB, but you bring back Tavita Pritchard. So, it is what it is on that. But he said that he likes to do hard stuff he likes to do hard stuff with good people. So he won't be doing any of the hard or tough stuff with EB going forward. But yeah, I think he made the right decision with Kliff. So the OC position, I wasn't sweating it like the head coach position. I think he got his guy. Kliff fell to us. He said in the presser too, like Kliff is a guy that he played against and he made it tough for him. So I think we got a good one on Kliff.
Rico.
Yeah, I mean, y'all said a lot of great points. I mean, the main things I would add is that since the Dan Quinn thing was so safe, I was happy that we're taking somewhat of a risk for offensive coordinator, even though he's proven that he can offensive coordinate, but it's still kind of like same thing with Chip Kelly. I just feel like Kliff Kingsbury is just a way better version of Chip Kelly in every way. Is that, with their little meltdowns at the end of seasons, have teams caught up to you? Do you know how to adjust back after teams counter you? And those were the same problems that we had with Chip Kelly. I feel like Kliff Kingsbury has the potential to do that. And I feel like, especially with him being able to focus on offense only and just getting yards and points, not handling too much personnel stuff. I think if he does that, because I think John Com did a podcast. I think he talked to like an Arizona Cardinals reporter, and the guy basically said like, yeah, Kliff Kingsbury was the head coach, and during training camp practices, basically he would be with the offense as much as possible. And then when he was with the defense, it kind of looked forced. It was just kind of like, yeah, let me stand here and look like I am the head coach and not the offensive coordinator. And then he would just go right back to the offense as soon as he could. And so you could just tell this is the type of guy that just wants to focus strictly on offense. So I was just happy. Again, like y'all said, once like he backed out of the Raiders thing, it just seemed like we're getting them. So I was already ready. I was already watching clips before they initially announced it. And then we technically got an announcement that Joe Whitt Jr. would be our defensive coordinator before the Kliff Kingsbury thing. But then the Kliff Kingsbury thing was like made official before the Joe Whitt Jr. defensive coordinator hiring. But they were kind of like back-to-back same night within like an hour or two of each other. And so then that's when the optimism started going through the roof. Again, a lot of us have been saying it for a while now that Dan Quinn, as much as whether we like him or not, he can pull together a staff. That was our way of convincing ourselves. But now we're starting to see that he actually can really put together what you could, I guess, say an all-star staff that we're starting to build here. And it looks like a lot of guys are like, they failed at this one thing. So let me take a step back, take a slight demotion to come do what I did best, get back to my roots for the Commanders.
That's right.
I'm really excited about what we have going on now.
And, to piggyback off of that, he could be waiting for staff members from Kansas City and San Francisco, right? They play in the Super Bowl. The Seahawks haven't hired a single coach yet, right? They're still sitting there, no OC, no DC, nothing, right? So who knows what would have happened had we hired Mike McDonald, because like you said, Quinn was able to put together a staff, or is in the process of putting together a staff that we feel really good about. Because the thing I like the most of these guys are teachers, right? Like Joe Whitt Jr. is a master at the defensive back position, right? Just that entire secondary. He is a teacher. That's how you saw the growth in Dallas with those corners in particular, those safeties, really, all of them. Like Dan Quinn gave him a lot of credit for those turnovers that were being produced in Dallas at such a high clip. I can tell you this, that aggravating, because I kept convincing myself, and this is the shit we do as fans of this team, is we start making up these narratives and then and we just run with it, and then we add on to it like it's the truth, right? So in my mind, I was like, Adam Peters, this is why because we only had 2 offensive candidates on our list that we were interviewing. The rest were defensive dudes. So I'm like, they're so heavy on the defensive side. I said, it makes me wonder, does Adam Peters have this secret list of OCs in his back pocket that nobody knows about from San Francisco or something like that, right? So everybody's like heavy on Clint Kubiak, like, oh, don't nobody know about Clint Kubiak, right? Right. New Orleans said, hey, bad, that's ours, right? Then I was like, okay, well, they got the tight ends coach out there, and they got this guy, run game coordinator, this guy, like there's somebody that they about to pull from that Shanahan tree, right? Like, you got something for us. And then there was nothing. And I'm like, uh-oh. Then we hear about Chip Kelly. Then we hearing about Brian Johnson. And then I'm like, yo, why is EB still here? Right. So I start panicking, like, yo, don't piss me off here. I've been good this whole time. Right. I've been rolling with the punch. Do not make me upset. Right. But cooler heads prevailed. Once, what's crazy? It's funny that you said that, Rio, because when Kliff Kingsbury pulled out of the Raiders, it didn't even dawn on me he was coming here. That didn't even click. I was like, oh, okay. I was like, that's crazy, man. I'm like, damn, that's wild. He backed out. I was like so oblivious. I was just like, I guess I had Chip Kelly tunnel vision. Like, do not hire him. Do not hire Chip Kelly. And boom, it literally went from he backs out to, I think it was within 30 minutes to an hour. We were getting reports that he's the number one candidate in DC.
It was almost immediate.
It was exactly like it happened almost simultaneously. And I was like, oh, okay, damn, Kliff Kingsbury, huh? I like that. I said, I like that. I think I like that one. So,
and Schefter was the one who started the whole Caleb Williams narrative, because Schefter put his name on that bomb, and it made me immediately think back to, this is how he got his first job in the NFL. He got the offensive coordinator job at USC. And as soon as he got that OC job, he got an interview from the Jets and the Cardinals. And they said, we're not letting you interview for an NFL job. You just took the job here. And he said, I quit. He resigned from the position before he started and took the Cardinals head coaching job. So this dude has a history of decommitment. So I was like, oh, he's game. As soon as he's back there, I thought, oh, he might be here, y'all.
All right, one more question, then we go to the comment section and get to some of these supers. What was the most surprising part of this entire process for you? The hiring of Peters, from that point forward, you watched that press conference, you're impressed, you like what you heard from Peters. What was the most surprising part from that moving forward to get to where we are right now, with the staff being filled out, Quinn being the head coach, all the things that we went through? Most surprising part that kind of caught you off guard the most? Start with Rico.
Well, I guess not including like the whole Ben Johnson thing, him backing up out of nowhere, because that caught, again, they were mid-flight. They caught them off guard. Yeah, everybody was caught off guard. I would say the Kliff Kingsbury hiring, because again, with the way that things were going, Dan Quinn looked like the safe, more likely answer. Like Ed just said earlier, like Adam Peters literally said in his press conference, we're going after a leader. You can't get much more leader than a Dan Quinn, to be completely honest. Maybe that's not what most of us wanted, but you couldn't get more leader than that. And it just kind of felt like it as soon as he said it. Weeks ahead, when Ben Johnson, all these guys were still candidates, it was like, oh, here we go. Dan Quinn. But that just felt like after a certain point, especially after Ben Johnson backed out, we knew that. Adam Peters, I wasn't very surprised. We may have some PTSD as a Berkney and Gold fan base, but I felt like a lot of us knew, even while we were still losing games to end the regular season, that we were going to be a top landing spot for a really smart GM that's willing to take a risk to get in at the ground floor of a potential great organization that we're trying to build like us right now, with the most cap space, number 2 draft pick, all of that type of stuff. It just makes sense why a guy like Adam Peters would want to take over something like this. You're going to get all of the credit, because even though you have all of these great assets, you have the draft pick, the cap space, and all of that type of stuff, people are going to look back years from now and be like, wow, you took that burgundy and gold and turned them into this burgundy and gold. So if I'm a guy, going back to the alpha male situation with Ben Johnson, if I'm Adam Peters, I'm looking at the Commanders like I would love to coach there. We even got to the point where it was like Adam Peters, Ian Cunningham, Alec Hallaby, all of the top guys wanted to be our guy. So I wasn't surprised at the Adam Peters hire, honestly. I was extremely happy, but I wasn't surprised. Kliff Kingsbury felt more like out of nowhere, again, like y'all have already said, first of all, it looked like he was already going to the Raiders. And also, even before that, even before it was rumored he was going to the Raiders, he just wasn't on my radar. Even with him being the senior offensive assistant to Caleb Williams, I didn't even think about him. We were so focused on Brian Johnson, stealing somebody from a winning organization like the 49ers, maybe like a Clint Kubiak, like we've already said, and things like that. So that was easily the most surprising, especially after we played it safe with Dan Quinn. I thought we was going to play it safe for the rest of the coaching staff. They were like, let's get us a leader that can be the glue, and then we can start to take some risks elsewhere, which I'm really happy about. I feel like it's a perfect combination.
Rio.
The biggest surprise for me was the speed at which news started breaking after we fired Ron. So I'm doing an 8 o'clock in the morning live stream as they announce Ron's firing the day after the season finale. 2 hours after the firing, Washington has requested an interview. They put out 5 GM candidates and 5 head coaching candidates by 12 noon. So we didn't even get to the afternoon yet. And after that means that they were completely, as we expected, they were sitting on this information all year and they were ready. They had a list. We were proactively going to be the first team to make a move this offseason because we knew Ron was going to be gone after the year. That was the biggest surprise, them actually going through with it and getting Adam Peters out the way within a week of starting the process. We got the most coveted guy, and we had 3 to 5 of the most highly seen and highly decorated executives up to be GMs in Miami coming down to Josh Harris's crib. That and the Bob Myers, Rick Spielman news, because that almost came simultaneously with the Ron Rivera news. It was like Ron Rivera just got fired. Woj comes out of nowhere and beats Schefter to it. Woj drops all the news for the NBA. He comes out. So Bob Myers and Rick Spielman will be helping Washington hire their GM. Our fans, they weren't up yet. They didn't have the crust out of their eyes. They read that as these are the new GMs for Washington.
Right.
And they really Bob Myers was coming from the NBA and from media to come be the GM. So the Bob Myers news and how fast we got right to the shits were the biggest surprise of the whole process for me.
Ed.
Oh, sorry, just to go back to the no leaks thing, I'm pretty sure this Bob Myers and all that stuff was going on behind the scenes for a while. And the fact that even like Woj and Adam Schefter, it was all put together and announced at the same time. I just also want to shout out for what we got going on right now. Everything's professional, no leaks. Love it.
It's a covert operation out here.
Man, it just feels like night and day right now. Ed.
I think just that whole process was a surprise. I've never seen a coach text the ownership in the front office while they're on the plane mid-flight. I've never seen that before. Heard it happen before. Of course, it happens to us. But yeah, I would say the Mike McDonald thing too, like because like so Schefter came on the Pat McAfee show. Nobody wanted to believe Schefter. Like we were on.
I had to apologize to that.
Yeah, because he said Dan, because Dan Quinn was supposed to go to the Seahawks. It was supposed to be, he was the defensive coordinator there. He won a Super Bowl with the Seahawks, the Legion of Boom, all that. He was supposed to go to the Seahawks. Ben Johnson was supposed to come here. He said one of those two or both are not a lock. Boomer Esiason said Ben Johnson was a lock. So it was supposed to be a lock here. So that happens. And then Mike McDonald not coming to DC, that shocked me too. And then somebody came out with a post. They were like, oh, his wife was a Skins cheerleader. She's a big fan of the team. He's definitely gonna come here.
I was pushing the narrative.
So it was like, oh man, he's definitely gonna come here. She's a Skins fan, so he's definitely gonna come here. They're right down the street, 95, all that. So I was shocked when he went to the Seahawks. Just the whole process of everybody kind of like the dominoes falling, and everybody going back to where they were, or Mike McDonald going to the Seahawks, and we come with Dan Quinn, but Kliff definitely came out of nowhere too, though, because him coming out of that Raiders job, that's something I wasn't expecting to, and then he came out as a strong candidate. So that was a huge surprise for me. So it was everything was tied into one, just how quickly everything fell, and then they had to pivot to Dan Quinn after that. But I do want to talk about Bieniemy. I know it's not a surprise. This is like the biggest non-surprise.
Yeah,
is that he's been dealing with the Chiefs, that he helped them out before the AFC championship
game. Yeah,
back to his roots.
Because that's where he's gonna have to end up. You know, everybody said he can't go home.
Pro waiting for him.
Where he gonna hear that at? When he was back home, he's gonna have to go to Kansas City to keep his name alive in these streets because it's not looking good for.
Hey, Seattle's open. Seattle's open. You never know.
It's really bad right now for Eric Bieniemy. I somewhere in there I feel bad for him, but I'm like, bro, and I got no animosity towards him. I was like, you gotta go, bro. You just can't be here, right? I think the part of this that was so surprising, and it probably shouldn't have been, and I told myself it wasn't going to be, but I still, because I've been a fan of this team for over 30 years. And in seeing the last time that we wanted the top guy at anything and him wanting us and having that reciprocated was when we hired Norv Turner from Dallas after they won their second Super Bowl. That's 1994. Jesus. That's the last time we had the pick of the litter and we looked at the best and hottest candidate out in the streets and said, hey, we want you. And that person said, yeah, I want you too. And when we got Adam Peters, I don't know why I wasn't surprised. I think I was just like, oh my God, this is happening. Because we have PTSD. Even if we don't want to admit it, we have PTSD, you know, and we always thinking in the back of our minds, something bad's about to happen, right? The other shoe, and even with this situation, the Ben Johnson situation happened, right? It's never all good for us. You know, it's just never a linear path to success or to happiness for us. We always got to go through some shit to get to where we ultimately want to be, if we even get there at all. And so what the process said to me, though, especially the Adam Peters hire, is that everybody was panicking, wanting Josh Harris to hire or fire Ron and do all of this stuff. And he was back there setting up all his dominoes quietly. You know, he was at work that entire time. And so, like Rio said, when the season was done, he was ready. He had the committee ready. He had that set up already. He had the candidates that they were going to hire. He had the or candidates that they were going to interview. He had the candidates for the head coaches that they were going to talk to that they could. He had everything plotted and set up, and even down to the point, and I don't think this was an accident, the two guys that he picked for the advisory committee, you know, people started, you know, the internet is undefeated, and they start collecting dots like, oh, you know, Bob Myers is friends with Adam Peters, right? And then
UCLA, I think.
Rick Spielman, right? His brother is Chris Spielman, who works for the Lions, who's really good friends with Ben. Like, you know, that's the type of shit we was on, right?
We're sleuths. We turning to Dick Tracy over fandom, bro.
Look, man, look, the internet is undefeated, and if you give enough time, they gonna figure out some shit. And if they don't, they gonna die trying on some 50 Cent shit, right? They gonna die trying to figure it out. And so we making up all these different narratives about why this, and like Rio, I had made 87 Ben Johnson videos already, bro, right? Like this was preordained. This was supposed to happen. It was crazy that it didn't go down the way that it was supposed to. But for him, like Ed said, for him to cancel us on the flight, and like Rio said, that wasn't even the way they found out. They found out on socials, like the rest of us. You gotta be kidding me. That is insane, right? Like, who does that?
I thought it was fake. I almost pulled over on the road because I was driving. I was like, there's no way. Like, how did we get here?
Like, that intern that read that shit was probably nervous as hell.
Wait a minute. What are we doing right now? This is crazy. This whole process has been wild, and I'm glad we've gotten to a place where we can laugh about this stuff now, because it wasn't funny a week ago. This shit was not funny a week ago, and this fan base was losing their minds. They were losing their minds, but we were able to navigate all of that. We've gotten to a place now where we feel good about this. We've convinced ourselves maybe we're crazy again, but this is what we do. And I think we're in a good place. Let's see what the viewers out there are saying. And shout out to the almost 1,100 of you out there showing up for the Kings holding court, man. We really, truly do appreciate you. Without y'all, there's no us, man. So thank you to every single one of y'all out there holding us down here on the show. Jason Files, thank you for being a member of the MOBB for 23 months. We almost at that 2-year mark, man. Squad goals. We appreciate you, Jason, man. We really, truly do appreciate you and all the support you give every single one of us, man. Thank you so much. Commander and Chief Daily, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Who writes, so proud of you guys. Keep up the good work. Wish this was a call-in show. Maybe one day we'll be able to do that. But see, this is the problem with y'all. Y'all don't know how to get in and get out. Y'all want to get on the mic. Y'all want to talk for 15 minutes. I don't want to be rude and just crush you and bang on you, right? I don't want to do that.
I had to do promo his album last time I did that. I was like, all right.
Hey, look, man, it gets really nasty when we we allow the phone lines to be open because, like, I tell you, they be ready. It's like they be ready to unload, and then he's like, I try to wait for a pause. There's no pause, right? To just step in and be like, all right, man, I appreciate you. They just be going. But anyway, we appreciate you, Commander in Chief Daily. Angus the Great, stand up. You are the newest member of the MOBB mob. Y'all know what to do. Show Angus the Great some love. Welcome him with open arms. Welcome to the squad. Angus the Great. Metaphor, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, salute to the true super friends, not those NFC East foes. You know what it is, man. The Kings stay holding it down here for y'all always and forever. We're going to continue to bring y'all the best in Commanders content because that's what we do. So y'all stay locked in all off season long because you know it's going to be craziness going on, and we're going to keep you abreast of all the information coming out about this team. Barrett Downing, my guy BD, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, the Four Horsemen are back again. Love you guys. Respect. You know what it is. Oh, wait, they're going to kill me for going with the wrong hand. Let me make sure I salute with the right hand for I get knocked out by some of these military alum in here. Contour, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Who writes, I love to see the Avengers unite. BNG HTTC. You know what it is, man. You know we got to do it for y'all. We got to put on for the people. Biggie Steve, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Biggie Steve writes, we needed Derrick Henry to help our young QB. Biggie Steve, you really trying to add a 30-year-old running back to the mix? Like, we don't got a young stallion already? Like, I know Derrick Henry is still getting it in, and his career is not done yet, and he'll go somewhere and be productive. But we got a back. We need some speed.
We need a jitterbug. We need an electric running back.
Yeah, we need some speed.
More horses.
Absolutely. Door Gunner, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, optimistic about our future, but not as excited as everyone else. I have to see results before I get too excited. I want to be hyped, but burned too many times. Love all 4 of your channels. So let's touch on that for a second before we go to the next super chat. Has there, in this process, at any point, has there been a chance where you took a step back and you said, do I need to pump the brakes? Or have you at every turn convinced yourself, hey, that's the right move? Has there been a time at any point, at any hire or any news coming out that you didn't necessarily agree with, where you said, is this going to really work? Is this going to work? Ed, any point where you kind of doubted this situation? And again, it may not work, but this is what we do as fans.
Oh, 100%, all of it, because Dan wasn't the first option. But I
don't think he was the second option either.
Yeah, he wasn't the second option either. But, you know, he's a respectable hire. And last year we got very excited with EB coming in from Super Bowl background, discipline, attention to detail. Everybody loved him in training camp and all this stuff. Coming from Scott Turner, you know, Scott Turner was more of a quiet guy. Everybody was excited for EB. We're going to get more discipline. We're going to get all this and all that. So I was excited with that. We saw how that turned out. Ron Rivera, I was happy when we signed Ron. I was like, that's another respectable hire. You know, went to the Super Bowl, lost, had some good defenses, had some good players, had an MVP quarterback. I was like, that's a good hire, man. That's a good choice. And then when we hired Jack Del Rio, I was excited about that too. I was like, it's a respectable hire. Did a good job with the Raiders. Jaguars, has a resume, all that. And, you know, we've seen Shanahan come through. We've seen so many people come through, and it's gone wrong. But the the thing that's changed that everybody's looking at in an optimistic way. Obviously, Dan Snyder's gone, and we have a legitimate general manager coming in.
That's right.
So Ron might have been successful. Maybe if he had another guy pulling the strings, where somebody was actually making personnel decisions and making the real draft decisions and not hiring and getting Thomas Davis and Andrew Norwell and Trey Turner and all these other, even the trainer getting the DEA coming in and actually hiring people that are not Commanders, so that's the optimism. That's where this feels different.
Yeah.
You have a general manager, you have a real structure this time. You have real structure and a real front office. So that's the difference between what's happened before. So I still am cautiously optimistic. I'm not getting my hopes up because I really did get my hopes up last year with EB and just in the past in general when Ron first came here. So I still want to see more, but I think there's real hope this time. There's real hope and there's real structure, and we have a brain trust. You heard in the press conference where they're going to be in lockstep. He's going to let Adam Peters do his thing, and then he's going to let Joe Whitt call the plays, Kliff do his thing. So there's a lot of optimism. I thought the pressure was really, really good too.
We're going to get to that in a second.
So I don't want to get into I'm not going to get into but that's the difference. Obviously, the new owner and just the GM. So that's the big difference from everything else. But Door Gunner, I feel you. I feel you, Door Gunner. You are very valid to feel the way you feel.
Rico.
Okay, so mine is a little different because it's kind of like I got burned, but in a good way, by my Georgia Bulldogs, because I've been telling people after number one recruiting class over and over again, I'm like, bro, we're finally going to have to win a championship, right? And then it would always be Alabama would just always find a way to stop us year after year after year. So the first game of the season, the year that we actually won the championship, I felt like as a fan, I didn't believe enough. I have to go back and rewatch those games with the belief, we can win a championship. It changes the way you watch those games. And so basically from that lesson I learned, I'm like, man, I'm going to be Mr. Glass Half Full with everything the Commanders are doing. We about to be Super Bowl contenders. Maybe not this year, maybe not in 2 years, but this is going to be a team that wins the Super Bowl within the next few years. I'm just super optimistic in every way possible because I'm just not going to let myself allow past trauma affect how I enjoy a potential
That's right.
great thing that an organization has going on. I really wish that season when we ended up finally winning the championship, breaking the whole curse against Alabama. I was there since week one, enjoying the ride and not looking like, oh, here we go. Something's about to go wrong. So this time as a Commanders fan, I've learned my lesson. I'm going in head first. You won't find a bigger cheerleader for us going on to win a Super Bowl than me. I'm going we about to win it by next year on my end.
Rico going all the way. Rio.
I'm sorry, got to.
No, I'm with you. I'm with you, and I'm of the belief also that everything is aligning for us to finally be there, finally be consistently in contention. It feels like all the cards are lining up for us. Our karma has dramatically increased since that little idiot doesn't own our team anymore. It's almost, I feel as if we should not have been allowed to prosper under that man because we would have been stuck with him for life if he got to hoist up a Lombardi trophy. So things that along the process that I was starting to feel like, when they announced that the Marty party was going to be staying aboard, and for a second I was like, oh, these cats are bugging. I know you know that man, Adam Peters, but are we really keeping Marty and Martin? Are we really about to continue with that? That, and as it looked like it was inevitable that Ben Johnson was going to be the coach, I was starting to have doubts, like, yo, what if he sucks? Yo, like, what if he is in over his head and he really is this introverted Jim Zorn type and absolutely throws up on himself? Like, as it felt like it was a done deal, I started to feel like, oh man, this feels too good to be true. When is the other shoe gonna drop? What don't I know about this character? There's got to be something I'm missing about this guy. So that and the Marty party are the two things that gave me pause, but I am in full optimism, true optimism. Like the Kool-Aid is real this time. It's not artificial. It's actual Kool-Aid of success coming. We have a real general manager that helped he had his fingerprints all over the build of a team that's playing in the Super Bowl and should have been playing in the Super Bowl last year as well. He built a team that's roster is so formidable that they took the biggest of quarterback swings that you can take and they kept trudging along and they're still winning in the process. So I'm all aboard the hype train right now, baby. DQ, AP, let's build.
Choot, choot. Toot, toot. Breaking news, Dallas just hired their defensive coordinator. It is going to be Mike Zimmer, the former Cincinnati Bengals defensive coordinator. Also Vikings head coach, former Vikings head coach, Mike Zimmer, new defensive coordinator in Dallas.
Poor Riverboat.
Al Harris. Yes, sir.
Poor Riverboat.
That golf course,
he's about to go crazy on the golf course.
Love it.
Florida.
Love when the plan comes together. King of the Bluegrass, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Who writes, question for you guys. You have $27 million in the cap space left. You need 3 linebackers. Who do you sign in free agency? So we'll start that one with Rico. $27 million in cap space. You need 3 linebackers. I mean, it's tough too because you can also attack that in the draft as well. But you need 3 linebackers. Give me
sign 3.
Yeah, I don't know if you're gonna get 3, but give me one. Give me one linebacker.
Well, so I'm assuming with $27 million in cap space, we went crazy on edge rusher. We addressed O-line because I don't know exactly how we got that far down, but I'm assuming with that much money gone, we're set at a lot of other positions. Now we're just like focus on linebacker. I feel like the obvious answer that a lot of people would say, and I haven't done enough like all 22 footage of watching this guy enough to know if he's just the perfect fit for like a Dan Quinn defense. But I think Ravens linebacker Patrick Queen would of course be an upgrade over a lot of what we had going on. I mean, just even looking at our linebacker group, we do need linebackers. Jamin Davis is like the only one that's notable that's still on the roster. Even Khaleke Hudson is an unrestricted free agent. We don't want David Mayo back. He's gone. He's gone. Cody Barton, maybe they re-sign him for cheap or something like that, but I don't want to depend on him. And then Jamin Davis is not only on IR, but he has legal trouble. So we really are struggling at linebacker. I would start with Patrick Queen.
Rio.
Give me Frankie Louvu, Carolina Panthers middle linebacker, man. Frankie Louvu, he's coming off 120 tackle season, had 111 tackles the year before. He's not going to break the bank. He's only 27 years old, which is still decent for a linebacker. And I think our major acquisition at this position is going to be an Adam Peters draft pick. But give me Frankie Louvu, Jamin Davis, and some freaky linebacker in the draft, and let's roll. That seems like a easy pick for me.
Ed.
Yeah, I probably go with Louvu too. It's not a sexy class. I'm like Bobby Wagner's a top 5 free agent. You know, he's getting up there. He's still productive. Patrick Queen, a lot of question marks with Patrick Queen is like, okay, the narrative is that he's only been good because he plays next to Roquan.
That's right.
So that's like the running narrative with him. I know he improved next to Roquan, so you got to see how he would be without him and how much is he going to command on the bank. You know, how much is he going to get paid and whatnot. So like Levante Davis on the list too. He's getting up there in age too. Devin White.
That's the one. That's the wild card. I mean, he fell out of favor quick.
He's washed now. He used to be so elite.
Man, I mean, he still got athleticism, but there's a lot of questions with him, man. But it's a crazy.
Devin White, he's a question mark too. But I mean, Dan Quinn, can he get the best out of these guys? Can he get the best out of Jamin Davis? You know, he wants guys not to think too much. So that's a big part for Jamin Davis too. So Devin White. But yeah, like I said, the linebacker class is not like a sexy class that you're really, really like, oh man, I got to get this guy.
Yeah. That it's going to be interesting because I think you get maybe one of those guys, former 49ers linebacker Azeez Al-Shire will be available again for the second year free agency from Tennessee. So there's some options available, but we'll see what they decide to do. Duncan Wright, been a member for a month. Really appreciate you for being a member of the MOBB. Who writes, "You sure you want Dan Quinn? 48 points is a lot to give up." I mean, that's being a prisoner of the moment. You can't focus on that. And obviously, he gave up 48. We all watched it in the postseason. You know, everybody was watching. It was bad. Luck with that taste in the mouth.
But say Dak gave him some of that. So don't give him the whole beef. You know what I'm saying?
That probably you could put on Dak's plate because you got the pick 6 and then you got the pick to Jair like inside the 20, right?
So that's 14. That's 14
right there. But at the end of the day, it wasn't a good look. But you can't erase the 3 years of the body of work that he built in Dallas off of just that one performance against the Green Bay Packers in the postseason. Swaggy P, my guy, Swaggy P, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, the Kings are here. That's right. Always excited for these collabs. What's the one free agent you really want during this upcoming free agency? We'll start with you, Ed. One free agent that you like, yo, if we can get him, I'm set.
Ah, man. That's a good question, man. I got to look at the linemen too. I know a lot of people, the dream was to get like T. Higgins, but I don't really think we need a receiver like that, to be honest. But I guess defensive end is something that we're really lacking, man. I think Bryce Huff is like a reasonable guy. I don't know about I don't think we're going to Daniil Hunter or Brian Burns. I don't know if we're going to get one of those guys. We have the cap space to do it, but I think Bryce Huff is like a realistic defensive end. You still got to draft one too, but defensive end is something. I think it's not a slept on position, but it's something like that. We gotta get that going.
Gotta get one in free agency.
You know,
that's not optional. If we do not do this, then we have a problem.
Yeah, right. And KJ Henry was listed as like a breakout player. I did see that. So I do want to see him get more chances.
Who listed KJ Henry as a breakout player?
I've seen that. Yeah, they listed him as a breakout player. If it wasn't for the Patriots game where they call roughing the passer, that was a nice play for him.
Even KJ said, "Leave me off this list."
Hey, wait a minute. Time out. I need a 30-second, man.
Shout out KJ Henry, man. I'm rooting for him, man. I don't want to jinx him like I did AGG back in the day.
I meant to start this show by saying, "Hey, Ed, we not doing none of that jinxing stuff."
Chill out, man.
Tonight.
You got a good thing going, Ed.
Shout out to KJ Henry, man. I'm putting the stage on KJ, so hopefully he has a good season coming up. But yeah,
tradition.
I think somebody like Bryce Huff, a DE, they got to get an edge. Brian Burns, of course, is somebody I'll throw out there too, but I don't know how realistic that is.
Yeah.
But I think one of the defensive ends, you got to take a look at one of those guys.
Rio.
Okay, so Bryce Huff was probably going to be my answer as well, so I'm a pivot. I like Cam Curl. I think he's a swell, solid, strong safety, bring down in the box linebacker type safety. I want a safety that can cover sideline to sideline. You remember the Legion of Boom in Seattle? There was a safety that could fly around the field. Give me Antoine Winfield Jr. of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Go spend some money for a do-it-all cover ground, cover safety that can force turnovers and make plays. I need my safeties able to create turnovers. Dan Quinn and Joe Whitt Jr. has led the league in turnovers, takeaways, back-to-back years. They three-peated as takeaway champions on that side of the ball. Give me a turnover-making, playmaking, true free safety. Give me Antoine Winfield Jr.
Rico.
Yeah, just to go back to Antoine Winfield, I feel like he had one of the most underrated seasons of any player this year. I just feel like just naturally playing the safety position. That's why a lot of people probably didn't notice. But he was ridiculous this year. But to go back to the point that I'm going to go with edge rusher, because I don't think a lot of people realize this, that like, yeah, we need O-line because we want to upgrade O-line. Edge rusher, we literally just don't have them. Like we literally, like it's not even like we're looking to upgrade. We just need bodies. Can we get somebody there to go out there on a Sunday and play edge rusher for us? I know we're tired of Charles Leno, we're tired of Andrew Wiley. The way supply and demand looks between free agency and draft, we're more than likely going to handle that in the draft. But free agency, I'm attacking edge rusher very aggressively. The hope that I have for Brian Burns is just based off of the fact that he doesn't look like he wants to be there with the exit interviews at the end of the season. He said something like, and I saw this clip going around, a lot of people brought it to my attention, that he said he like literally felt unwanted. He felt like he wasn't a priority for the Carolina Panthers, and that he, may just end up trying to go elsewhere where he does want to be wanted. So we'll see how that goes. I think it's highly unlikely that Josh Allen gets away with franchise tag, and they're going to find a way to pay those guys. But if I had to pick one guy that we would love to get, but is also fairly realistic, my money's on Brian Burns, because we need edge rushers so bad. It's really bad.
Yeah, mine is Jonathan Grenard from the Texans. I don't see how they let him get away. But again, another guy off the edge. We got to get somebody to get to the quarterback. And like Rico said, we don't have anybody. Like, we don't have anybody except the rookies from last year. That's it. Like, nobody's under contract. It's crazy. Reese P. Ludwig, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Writes, all of y'all are dogs. Hey, we appreciate that, man. We appreciate that. Fat American, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, y'all, can you put my mind at ease as to what was the cause of DQ's downfall? I'm hoping it was injuries, bad GM, something. Looking for some hope here. I can speak to this. I had a guest on, John Bueller, who talked about the draft as one of those things that he did not do well. But one of the biggest downfalls was not being able to hold leads. And I really think, like John said, he got into his head after the loss to the Patriots. We saw them blow massive leads, and it became a running joke, and it almost seemed inevitable anytime they got up big in a game that they weren't going to be able to find a way to sustain it. Obviously, and Quinn told us himself, and John kind of, I thought he did a really good job of cementing a lot of those things that Dan Quinn said, which was he was trying to do too much, right? Yep. He had his hands in some of everything. He didn't do a good enough job of delegating, and he felt like he wanted to keep the main thing this time. And what's crazy is, sometimes the thing that you want the most you don't need, and the thing that you don't want is exactly the thing that you need, right? And we wanted this first-time head coach, whether it was Slowick, Johnson, McDonald. We probably needed a guy that had already been a head coach before with this group. It just felt like that was the right thing for them to do, But ultimately, we'll see. Does anybody have anything to add there about DQ's first stint as a head coach in Atlanta?
I'll go real quick because I gotta pull. I'm sorry, I gotta exit the stream a little early. Boy, got to get to work in a couple minutes. But DQ, it ultimately, the back-to-back years of heartbreak, the Super Bowl loss, giving up a 25-point lead, and then the next year it was supposed to be Patriots Falcons again. They were on the 1-yard line playing the Eagles in the divisional round versus Nick Foles. They would have cleaned the Vikings in case Keenum them up in the divisional round. And the next week, they should have been in back-to-back Super Bowls. Shanahan left. They were never able to really capitalize off of that. And once they started 0-5, he was already on his way out. The writing was on the wall going into that year on his way out. But like he made a big point during the press conference to say, here, I want to make the main thing. Adam Peters is going to make all personnel decisions and stuff. They're going to have a vision that they can go together. But here, he can just be a head coach of a football team. Nothing more, nothing less. I think this is the perfect setup for his Act 2 in the NFL.
Go ahead and hit that, Rico. I see you had something, and then we're going to let Rio get out of here.
Yes, sir. So, yeah, I believe that I was seeing reports around that, like, he was asking everybody that would listen that was on his previous Falcon staff, like, where did I go wrong? What could I have done better? And things like that. Logan Paulson even spoke highly of him even before we hired of him. Like, there were a lot of people that were really disappointed in the potential of us getting Dan Quinn after Mike McDonald was hired by the Seahawks. Logan Paulson, the whole process was saying, believe in Dan Quinn. That could be a great hire. And I know because he's gone around and asked, like, literally everybody be completely candid with me, be completely transparent. What could I have done better? And then also him coming here. And I was pretty surprised to see him, like, not take on defensive play calling duties. I mean, maybe you kind of had to do that, give that to Joe Whitt Jr. to entice him to leave the Cowboys to come to the Commanders as a defensive coordinator, because maybe he could have done the same thing with the Cowboys. But because I felt like that was probably a requirement to get a Joe Whitt Jr. But either way, you could tell that Dan Quinn, he just said it in his press conference, was something that he said to the extent of, I just want to focus on everything else. I want to let somebody basically control the defense, let somebody on the offense control the offense, and I just bring it all together. And, I'm able to pay attention to all of the smaller details because I'm not worried about so many things on my plate. So that's why I'm very optimistic. And I feel like a lot of people didn't, if you go back and look at the tweet when the Falcons announced the hiring of Kyle Shanahan, the comments were even more negative than how a lot of people felt about this Kliff Kingsbury hire. So at this point, I just whenever he makes a hire, I'm just going to give him the benefit of the doubt at the very least, especially as offensive coordinator, because a lot of people were through with Kyle Shanahan after his stint with the Browns.
I'm excited about everything that's going on right now. And, you know, again, as Door Gunner said earlier, cautious optimism. He was like, I need to see it first. We totally get that. We totally get that. Hey, really appreciate you, Rio, for the time, bro. We got to do this again. We got to link up soon here in the future, man. But really appreciate you coming on and blessing us, man, as one of the Kings.
Appreciate y'all. Appreciate you three. Keep killing it with the content. This is probably the biggest off season for all of us. I appreciate y'all for including me on this panel and in this Washington Commanders content sphere. Keep going up, and happy Black History Month to all three of you.
You know what it is.
Yes, sir. You too.
Stay safe, bro.
Crazy, man.
Let's get it, man.
Big Bad Wolf Beatty. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Who writes F Buckshot 00 Buckshot. Question for y'all. How do y'all feel about us taking Jaden at number 2? I like it. Plus, that Michigan quarterback looked nice too. We'll start with you, Rico. How do you feel about Jaden potentially being the quarterback at 2 or McCarthy?
Well, I want to preface it with, again, with the whole optimism, glass half full thing. As excited as we were about getting Adam Peters, why are we just automatically not going to give him the benefit of the doubt no matter what they decide to do number 2 overall pick? If they trade back, if they take Jaden Daniels, they take Drake May, whatever. So no matter what decision they make, I'm just going to assume they did all of the research possible. If they want to take quarterback, they have a system in place. They're prepared to do whatever it takes to surround them with the right weapons, the right offensive line. So no matter who they take, I'm going to find a way to convince myself that it was the right pick anyway. But Jaden Daniels specifically, I would love Jaden Daniels. Now, maybe there's some SEC bias here, but I saw what he did against some of the fastest, most athletic, quickest, strongest defensive players out there every Saturday. They weren't losing because of him. And so just out of that respect, because again, as a UGA fan, what CJ Stroud did to me in that playoffs where they really should have won that game, the kicker just makes a regular kick. That immediately bolted him to my number 1 quarterback. I was like, I've seen everything I need to see. What he did to our guys, that's all. And Jaden Daniels had a similar effect, even though we never played him. And then you look at you look at the film, you look at the stats. He was like the best deep ball thrower in the class. Again, with anybody, we're going to convince ourselves that guy is the right guy. But Jaden Daniels, even isolated from that, I'm really excited about him. His mobility, the Kliff Kingsbury air raid system where mobility is going to matter. We're going to see a lot of light boxes because we're going to, keep sending receivers deep down the field. You got to cover all 80 yards when you're defending against a Kliff Kingsbury air raid offense. That's going to make things easy for a quarterback to run with the ball. Jaden Daniels just has to learn how to slide, man. That looking like you're getting hit by a cartoon mallet every time you get hit has to stop. If he learns how to slide, getting that Lamar Jackson tape of how to slide. Because one thing about Lamar Jackson, he's elite at sliding. I feel like that's a really underrated trait. You never see him really get hit with like a clean textbook tackle, clean hit that makes him look like he's falling all over the place. Jaden Daniels has that all over his tape. That's one of my biggest worries with him. You also got to teach him to throw on the run more. He can, but once he's gone, it's legs the whole way, and you got to adjust to that. That's coachable at the NFL level. But for Kliff Kingsbury, he can get the most out of it, I believe, out of arguably any of the quarterbacks available.
Ed.
Yeah, this will be my last one. I'll probably roll out for the night too. But I like Jaden, man. He's super electric, man. You've seen him improve after transfer from Arizona State. Big numbers, electric, speedy. He can throw guys open too. So I like him a lot at number 2. I wouldn't mind him at number 2 as well. I know he didn't ask about Drake May, but Drake May is an option right there too. JJ McCarthy, he's fine. I feel like he was more of a game manager, and that's not a bad thing. But at number 2, I mean it is. That is true. It is number 2. Yeah, I can't say JJ McCarthy at number 2. Honestly, he's more of like a second round pick. They relied on the back of their running backs like Blake Corum. He had some big games for them. Like you look at some of JJ McCarthy's games, he's only throwing the ball like 15 times. Like they're not asking him to do too much.
All right.
He doesn't go Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah, I know Jim Harbaugh is trying to hype him up. He's like, "Oh man, I would take him with the first pick of the draft and all that." Trying to hype up his own guy. But I think Jaden would be a good pick at number 2, especially with Kliff Kingsbury's offense. You've seen what he's done with Kyler. just spreading the guys out and letting him run, do his own thing, be creative and be innovative and improvising with Jaden Daniels, I think he would be a good pick number 2.
Let me get to this next one because this one is actually for you, Ed, and then we'll get you out of here. Jay Hunter Lee, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Jay Hunter Lee writes, "What's up, fellas? What's up, Jay?" Says, "I enjoy y'all content. DQ mentioned recalibration as opposed to rebuilding. Could my man Ed bring the Wizards to the front of the congregation as an example of a real rebuild real quick?"
Yeah, the Wizards, they got a long way to go, man. We just traded Gafford today we got a first round pick, which is great, but they still got a long way to go, man. Like we have a bunch of second round picks, but the Commanders is different. We got a lot of draft. We got 2 second round picks. We got 2/3. We got our first. So they're starting off on the right foot. The Wizards, I feel like they got a longer way to go right now.
Did you think they were going to trade Tyus?
They should have.
I thought they were going to move him.
Yeah, they didn't trade him. They didn't trade DeLon Wright and Landry Shamet. They didn't trade a lot of guys. They only traded one guy. Like Kuzma didn't get traded, so they don't have a lot of ammo. They don't have a lot of first round picks. But the Commanders, they have a chance to make a lot of noise with 2 second round picks, 2/3, and you got the second pick of the draft. Like Adam Peters can be creative. Either he can move up into the first if he wants to, and get another first. Like there's a lot of things he can do. Where the Wizards, they just don't have a lot of that right now. And this 2024 draft is not a great draft either for the NBA. So they got a long way to go.
That's right. And that's probably why they weren't willing to give up a whole bunch of these guys unless they got blown away by an offer, because this isn't the draft to be loading up on a bunch of picks, especially in the first round, so I kind of get that if they didn't get blown away.
Yeah. And Jay Hunter, I'll say Jordan Poole, he's got to go. But I won't talk too much about the Wizards too long.
They had to find out the hard way that man was trash. That was hilarious. Hey man, we appreciate you, Ed, man, for tapping in with us, and we look forward to chopping up with you again, man. Take care, stay up, and be blessed, bro.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Have a good one.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Brandon Thomas, thank you for being a member for 17 months. Really appreciate you. All right, shout out to the 4 Horsemen. Keep it up, fellas. We appreciate you, man. Thank you so much. Brandon, Big Daddy Butts writes, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Who writes, love my family, my little bro. We appreciate you, Big Daddy Butts, man. Keep holding us down. John Craig, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Who writes, love and subscribe to all 4 of you guys. HTTR. We appreciate that, man. Please continue to support the movement. Brendan McCloskey, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, great to see you guys tonight. Caleb to DC for Rio, please. I don't think it's going to happen. You think it's going to happen, Rico?
No, I don't think it's very likely. I hope, but I feel like it would be more likely if like Caleb Williams was like the only guy I could see us getting aggressive. And even then, like even if Drake May and Jaden Daniels didn't exist, I still think it would be very unlikely. But the fact that they do, I could see Kliff Kingsbury being like, I can make it work with either of these guys. So don't even waste your draft capital. And Adam Peters already said that he wants to build through the draft. Eugene Shin said he said 2 late picks are better than 1 earlier pick. If anything, we're more likely to trade back than to trade up.
Yeah, I can't see a scenario in which the Bears even entertain trading the number 1 pick, other than Chicago getting wind of the fact that he doesn't want to be there, which we haven't got any sense of him not wanting to be in Chicago. There's been rumors. His team has dispelled those rumors. I can't see the Bears passing up on this opportunity to draft him, but we'll see. Barrett Downing, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Who writes, is the B word on the table for Chase for any of you guys? I think that's a pretty safe assumption at this point. What about you, Rico? Is Chase Young a bust in your mind?
Yeah, it's really ugly because it's the lack of effort that's like really shocking. And then we saw the report like after they won, there was a report coming out before leading up to the Super Bowl that they may consider sitting him because of the lack of effort. At that point, we could talk about bust because of injuries, but now on the mental side of things, it's starting to get safe to assume that number 2 overall pick, and you're not even out there trying on the best team that you could potentially be on. You could potentially go out there and win a Super Bowl, and you don't want to try for them. Who will you try for? So yeah, I think it's safe to say.
Yeah, it wasn't a good look. I mean, he made a couple of plays in that game, but the lack of effort was startling on a few plays there. And like I don't like piling on a guy. He's not here. It is what it is. I wish him nothing but the best. I hope he wins the Super Bowl, right? I hope Trent gets the Super Bowl. Like I have no animosity towards any of those guys, but it was not a great look on some of those snaps. And context is everything. That could have been the 11th straight snap for him. On that drive, he hadn't been out of the game, but still, it didn't look good. I can tell you that much. When you spend the number 2 overall pick on a player, you expect him to at least make it to the end of his rookie deal. He didn't even do that here in Washington. Jason Fios, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy, Jay writes, what up, squad? What's going on with you, Jay? Says, are we all in at QB at number 2? How about Baker or Fields plus Marvin? Thoughts? So would you take an alternate route, not taking the quarterback at 2, but rather going in a different direction? Baker Mayfield will be a free agent. I don't see how Tampa lets him leave. Obviously, if the Bears are taking Caleb Williams at 1, then Justin Fields becomes available, and then drafting Marvin Harrison Jr. at number 2. What says you, Rico?
Well, if we would go with that scenario, I would honestly prefer to go ahead and take a top tackle, even though Marvin Harrison Jr. is like a different type of player, but I would prefer to maybe trade back a little bit further and then go ahead and get Olu Fashanu in that scenario. Justin Fields, I am the type that would be willing to give him a chance, but the problem is you got to pay him so much money very soon. I mean, even just ignoring can he be a good quarterback and all of that type of stuff. My biggest worry is that maybe even before you get that answer and you find out with him going to a whole new system, whether he stays with Chicago or comes here, it's a whole new system, new offensive coordinator, no matter what he does. But it may take some time for him to adjust. And by the time we have to pay him potentially top quarterback money, we may not even know if he's deserving of that top quarterback money. If this were a couple of years ago, he still had a lot of his rookie contract left. Yes, but with where we currently stand, I prefer to just go ahead and take your guy now. I feel like, this is the first time we've been able to just start clean top to bottom. New GM, almost a new owner, new head coach, new offensive coordinator, new everything. Let's just go ahead and bring the quarterback in with that, in my personal opinion.
I think when you get this high in the draft, and you don't have a quarterback, and the draft is so rich with them, especially at the top, you almost are obligated to take a swing at the quarterback position. There's so many people out there that would love to give Sam Howell another opportunity. And my rebuttal to that every time is you can't be this high and not take a quarterback. Had we been the 7th pick in the draft, okay, maybe there's a chance you don't take quarterback, right? Or you don't take quarterback until a little bit later, and now you have a true competition. But when you're sitting there at 2 and there are 3 quarterbacks that everyone covets in this draft, you got to take one of them and build around that quarterback. If you love one of these guys, I assume that they're going to feel good about one of the 2 that are remaining after Caleb Williams goes 1 overall. If that's the case, you got to take them. I kind of think that's the position that you've put yourself in by doing what they did. In any event, Metaphor, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Who writes, y'all keep DQ's name out your mouth. He's from my 201, Morristown, Colonial, Bergie, and Gold. Now about Brian Johnson. He's ours now. Quarterback whisperer. I think he does tremendous work. Rico can speak to this as well. As long as he's not calling plays here, and ultimately, and I said this in the video earlier, who knows? In 2 years from now, Kliff Kingsbury kills it. Someone comes calling. He decides to run and go after a head coaching gig. And Brian Johnson may be the next man up. He may be the guy that takes over as the play caller. Maybe he learns from his first experience in Philadelphia. But for now, for the time being, he's not calling plays here. And the thing that he did really well in Philadelphia and has done, and if you go look at his track record, you look at his resume, it's littered with quarterback coach. He was the offensive coordinator of the Florida Gators as well. But this is what he's done. He's been a guy that has worked closely with young quarterbacks, has gotten them to play well. And he did the same thing with Jalen Hurts. And it's funny watching Eagles fans try to discredit him now, and he didn't have anything to do. And that's not what they were saying last year when they promoted him to offensive coordinator now, right? But he's not calling the plays here. I feel good about him. What says you, Rico?
Yeah, I'm very excited about it. Because to add to your point about the whole Jalen Hurts development, he also developed Dak Prescott in college. If anybody knows those guys' weaknesses and habits,
That's right.
if there was anybody that Dan Quinn could talk to, like, hey man, like help me out, like when Dak Prescott does this on film, what is that typically? All of that type of stuff, it would be him. So we have the inside scoop on everything that Dak Prescott hates, Jalen Hurts hates, and all of that. But also, of course, the QB development side of it. We're bringing in a lot of quarterback developers. Kliff Kingsbury has been a great quarterback developer. And then, of course, Brian Johnson as well there. And I feel like he was the reason for the collapse of the Eagles a little overblown. They were still like 7th in points in the NFL. They were like 8th in yards. I didn't like his play calling, but they were still pretty productive. And I feel like it's kind of, if you put it in a scenario as like, what if Bobby Slowick were to have a down year for the Texans this year? Would we as a fan base, would we not want him in the 2025 cycle? You know, if for any reason we had an opening like an offensive coordinator or anything like that. I feel like Brian Johnson was getting not the same level, but similar love that Bobby Slowick is getting this hiring cycle, kind of like almost like a Ben Johnson sort of in a way. And then he just had that down year. And of course, it was Super Bowl or bust for them. If you to come in as a first-time offensive coordinator at the NFL level, and to still be top 8 in a lot of offensive categories, that wasn't good enough. He was considered a failure. I'm happy that we landed him.
And, you know, to add to that, the Eagles defense was terrible. And so it always forced the Eagles offense to have to be superhuman for them to win. And look, I'm not defending his play calling. He was horrible, you know, especially down the stretch with all those quarterback draws and things of that nature, not getting the ball to DeAndre Swift. There are a lot of things that I question about what he did in Philadelphia. But, you know, helping develop quarterbacks isn't one of those things I question, which is what he'll be doing here. Now, what his role will be specifically, now knowing that Tavita Pritchard has been, retained as the quarterback's coach, it's going to be, they said it was a prominent role, right? When they announced that he'd be, you know, signing on here in Washington, I just assumed, he'll be the quarterback's coach and the pass game coordinator. Not exactly. So now I'm like, well, with Tavita being back, what is this guy exactly going to be doing? It's getting really intriguing now to look and see what he may be doing. I just assumed he'd be the quarterback's coach. Clearly, that is not what he's going to be now. So, Davo from the 757, thank you for being a member of the MOBB and greatly appreciate you for super chatting. My guy Davo writes, I did some thinking. Maybe DQ was always AP's guy. Josh and the rest of the owners wanted Ben Johnson. I mean, that could be the case, but what makes you feel that way, Davo? I mean, the rest of the owners probably wanted Ben Johnson. I think everybody was really intrigued by Ben Johnson. Maybe, I don't know how they felt walking away from that first Zoom interview, but you know, I think it was the echo chamber of the media and the fans and everybody just assuming Ben Johnson was number one. Maybe he was never number one. Who's to say, right? We can hear all of the different rumors. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Rico, about the other owners wanting Ben Johnson, but AP all along wanted Dan Quinn.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure how much I believe that. But at the end of the day, now that we got our guy, I'm excited. So I honestly don't care where he was on the list. I think with the staff that we put together, it's gonna be fantastic anyway.
I'm with you 110%. Coach T. Brown, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Right. Chicago will want the Herschel Walker deal for Caleb. It won't be that extravagant, but they're going to want more than people think. I was having a conversation with my guy, Derek B., and he was like going through the history of trading up from 2 to 1. And this is, you know, you don't have to give up the next year's 1 to do it. And I'm like, yeah, but times change. And this is a different quarterback. And so I don't know if you're going to get away with not giving up next year's 1 just to move up 1 spot. Well, you know, we'll see if that opportunity presents itself, which I don't think it will, but we will see. Video channel, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you, video channel. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Writes, 4 Kings. Thoughts on how Terry will be used in Kliff's offense? Rico, want to tackle that?
Well, first of all, with him loving to run a lot of 4 wide receiver sets, runs 10 formation, which is 1 running back, no tight ends. Probably more than any other offensive coordinator is going to do in 2024. I know Terry McLaurin is going to see a lot more one-on-ones. Now, hopefully, this is a guy that would actually want to target his, supposed number 1 receiver more than Eric Bieniemy did, than Scott Turner did, or whatever. But I know for a fact that Terry McLaurin will be open more. Now it's up to Kliff Kingsbury to call the plays to get it to him. It's up to the quarterback to throw it to him. But I know Terry McLaurin is going to be open. One thing about it for sure.
And in Kliff's offense, the ball comes out quick. So I think we can see a situation where Terry's able to get to those screens, those quick screens, those wide, those slants, those shallow crosses, get it into his hands quickly, and then allow him to use some of that speed that we've seen with the ball in his hands after the catch at times, and lull him to sleep with all of the quick passes, and then allow him to maybe get on top of some of these DBs. So it'll be a fun offense for sure, because I think we have the talent. We'll see what they do at receiver and what they do at tight end, because I do know Kliff Kingsbury, as time progressed, he evolved the offense, and they started out not throwing the football to the tight ends at all. Like Rico said, a lot of 10 personnel, but as it evolved and they got Zach Ertz, it turned into a lot of 11 personnel. And if you go out and find that tight end, I think you can really enhance this offense. You won't need as much from your receivers, but I look forward to seeing a guy like Terry, and really Jahan too. Like, he really was a disappointment last year, and I don't think it was really, largely due to him. Rather, I think a lot of it was just the lack of attention to detail and on the part of Eric Bieniemy to get specific playmakers involved and get them the football. So I'm excited to see what Jahan can do in year 3, man, because I think this dude is super talented, and to hear some of the fans talk about him in such a negative light, it's just crazy to me. Like, this guy wasn't worthy of a first round pick and can't play at a high level in this league. So I'm excited for a guy like him to be in this offense.
And to add to the Jahan Dotson part, since he's such a smart route runner, you could argue, like, nuance-wise, technique-wise, he's probably our best route runner on the roster. Kingsbury's offense gives receivers the freedom to kind of change your route a little bit, adjust it based on like the leverage and coverage that you see in front of you. And I feel like Jahan Dotson will excel in that. They'll give him more freedom, and they'll probably target him more because they'll trust him more to make the right decisions post-snap. Like, they'll look at what's going on pre-snap and know, okay, there's a linebacker here, so I know I'm supposed to run this 4 yards and then cut, but maybe I should run it 5 and then cut based on what I'm seeing in front of me. I think he'll be perfect for a system like that.
I hope that is exactly what takes place. That's exactly what we need. Brandon Thomas, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, let's hope our picks work for us finally. Fields can go elsewhere or stay in Chicago. The Bears can start over with Caleb or let someone else break the bank for number 1 overall, HTTC. And I'm starting to feel this groundswell of momentum for not trading up to number 1. I think there's still a large contingency out there that would love to see this team go up and go get Caleb Williams. But I think there's a lot of fans that are starting to stand up and say, nah, we good at 2. Like, we don't need to go up, give up a whole bunch of draft picks. We'll see. This process has a way of changing people's minds or strengthening their beliefs. We'll see what happens ultimately. It'll be interesting. I'll say that. That'll definitely be one of those situations that we'll be watching very closely as we get closer to the draft. John Craig, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. John writes, please, no Daniels. Dude's gonna get broken. He gained some weight his last year at LSU. He put on some weight. That was something that he needed to do. He's still a slender guy, but I asked Rico because I know he watched the SEC a lot closer than I did. Did he have issues with staying healthy when in college?
Not really, but the way he was getting hit, if he keeps doing that, it's not going to survive at the NFL level. It's just no way. I don't know how he did it in the SEC. I believe he played every game this last season. And I mean, maybe sometimes he looked a little hurt, but he was out there and still ran for 1,000 yards and all that type of stuff. like we talked about earlier, he's got to avoid them big hits, though. You got to learn how to slide better. That's the difference between basically an RG3 and a Lamar Jackson, the ability to avoid getting hit. All that speed is cool, but you got to know when to get out of bounds and slide.
That's right. I couldn't agree with you more on that. Like, you rarely, and you said this, and I like, that is one of the most profound statements, is you rarely see Lamar get hit flush. Like, he does not take big shots. For as much as he runs, you rarely see somebody square him up, and it's a lot of dudes out there that slide, like Russell Wilson, former baseball player, slides. You really don't see Russ take a lot of big shots throughout his career, as a runner. And that's something that you got to find a way to be able to do, right? It's a lot of dudes out here that's just trying to fall down or find somewhere. You got to find a way to slide. CJ Stroud played baseball. He can slide. Like, you got to find a way to be able to slide, hit that turf. Kevin, the PRF, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, can we collectively stop saying this feels different? Because it does. What do you want us to do? This feels different, feels the same. Don't jinx it. Say something else, anything. I get it, but it does. And again, you got to acknowledge the elephant in the room. Daniel Snyder's no longer here. We have a real general manager. Like, these things exist. So it does feel different because it is different, but I get what you're saying. I totally understand where you're coming from. Davo from the 757. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Who writes, I say that because I've seen DQ up in the booth with energy and passion. 3/4 of the games we've seen DQ held the Niners under 20, offense under 24. I don't know if we can definitively say that, but I just know that Adam Peters wanted a guy who aligned with the way that he thought. And I'm going to tell you something else. A lot of these candidates that were highly sought after wanted some sort of control or power. And Washington wasn't trying to do that. That's why we never even entertained the thought of talking to Bill Belichick. A lot of people were like, why we didn't talk to Vrabel? Because Vrabel wanted power. They wanted a guy that didn't want any of that power, but just wanted to coach. What did Dan Quinn say? I don't want none of that. I had that already. I don't want it. I just want to coach. Think about Kliff Kingsbury. I don't want to be a head coach. I don't believe him, but I don't want to be a head coach. I just want to coach offense. They wanted guys that were bought into the same vision, to the same principle, which is, hey, we're going to stay in our lane. We're going to do our thing to the best of our abilities, and we're going to allow everyone to do their jobs, and we'll come together and we'll make this thing work. And Adam Peters is going to be the guy picking the players. Obviously, there will be input from Dan Quinn. There will be input from Kliff Kingsbury. But at the end of the day, Peters is the guy in control. And that's what Washington wanted. And Quinn fits that to a T, So we'll see. We'll see what happens. And you want to add anything to that, Rico?
I mean, yeah, I just feel like Dan Quinn, if anything, he just has to learn to stop Shanahan offenses. It just seems like every time it's a Shanahan coaching tree guy, he just has to learn how to adjust to that, and we'll be fine because they've done great against pretty much, it seems like, any other coaching tree. So if we can get over that Kyle Shanahan coaching tree hump, we're set. We don't even have to worry about defense. And like you said, I just believe in the whole organization, even just outside of the defense by itself, and just Dan Quinn himself, Joe Whitt Jr., Adam Peters to put the team together and everything. I think they're going to make it work, and they're going to find a way to win.
What's crazy about that, you bringing that up, is you would think Kyle was on his staff. You would think he would have a better handle on what Kyle is doing and how to slow it down just a bit. You know what I'm saying? Like, you would think, being with him for a couple of years, he'd have a better handle on it. But clearly that has not been the case. HTTR Carson, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Writes, are y'all butthurt about Trent Williams or Chase Young or nah? HTTC. Rico, any animosity towards any of those individuals there, or are you like, nah, if they win a Super Bowl, I'm cool with that. I got nothing against those guys.
Yeah, go crazy. I mean, the Trent Williams situation, I can't even blame him with the Bruce Allen, the whole medical emergency and things like that. He was just ready to go. You can't blame Ron Rivera for being a part of it, like trading them away. It was just he had to go anyway, and I'm happy for him. And then Chase Young, he's just so far in the past for me. Just go crazy, win a Super Bowl, do your thing. No hard feelings my way.
Me either. I'm one of those people that they were never, neither of those players were ever disrespectful to the fans. They were never out of pocket. I got nothing. Again, with Trent's situation, I felt like Ron could have salvaged it because he really didn't get along with Bruce. Bruce was no longer here. Had he just made a phone call to Trent as his first priority, there may have been a chance he could have salvaged it here. But like you said, it's probably best for all parties involved that there was a clean break. And he's going on. The thing that sucks is he's going to be a Hall of Fame player, and he's not going to go in as a Commander or Redskin. He's going to go in as a 49er. And that's the part
that's going to be the weird part.
Yeah,
that's the part.
Yeah. That's going to be the part that sucks. That's when it's going to hurt right there. Christopher McLaughlin, my guy Chris, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. And I'm glad because Frank McLaughlin, I want to give a shout out to my guy Frankie baby, for the donation, the generosity on Cash App. Thank you so much, Frank. I meant to give you a shout out earlier. Seeing Chris's name made me think of you. Frank McLaughlin, thank you so much for the generosity. Truly do appreciate you. And same can be said for my guy, Chris. Thank you for your generosity as well. My guy, Chris writes, hey, Lou, Rico, Ed, and Rio. Hope everyone is doing well. Enjoy each of your channels. 2 questions. Sorry we couldn't get to this one while the whole gang was still here, but you still got me and you still have Rico to knock this one out for you. He says, who are each of your top 3 Commander free agents that you would want to resign and why? And then for everyone except Lou, what are your expectations, goals for this season and why? So I'll let you knock out the first question and then knock out the second one. The first question, 3 top Commander free agents. So 3 guys you would like to re-sign who are currently Commanders going into free agency.
I feel like first off, got to start with Curtis Samuel. First of all, we don't have a lot of receivers, and we're going to need more receivers now than ever with Kliff Kingsbury wanting to run more receivers. I think we may never see a 2 tight end set, so we just need more receivers in general. But also Curtis Samuel would be so perfect for his system, being able to get open underneath, being able to be utilized out of the backfield as a secret weapon. But also remember, before we signed him from Carolina, he was like statistically the best deep ball threat in the NFL. Hasn't actually turned out to be that since he's been here, and it may be more of coaching fault, quarterback play fault, lack of O-line, whatever. But I feel like Kliff Kingsbury can finally tap into that and remind people that Curtis Samuel is a serious deep threat when utilized correctly. Then also Antonio Gibson. Because I don't think Antonio Gibson is going to ask for too much money, especially after the past season that he's had, season and a half with the fumbling and everything like that. I think he's another guy that would be great in the system. Now, of course, I expect Kliff Kingsbury to maybe go get somebody in the draft, but I think an Antonio Gibson, there's not a lot of people in the NFL that can take an 80-yard screen like Antonio Gibson did against the Buffalo Bills. And if somebody could just send that clip to Kliff Kingsbury, I'm pretty sure he would be banging the table to bring Antonio Gibson back, because I'm pretty sure he's going to look at Eric Bieniemy and be like, how did you not get more out of that? So I think that would be a great one. And then I feel like, even though I'm not sure if we'll prioritize them that much on like the Adam Peters side of things, but I think Cameron Curl, I feel like that's a lot to replace for a defense where you already have holes. We're already worried about O-line, worried about edge rusher. We're worried about linebacker. That just creates another hole if you don't find a way to bring Cameron Curl back. He's not very athletic, so I'm not sure how much he exactly fits the super risk-taking, gambling Dan Quinn secondary and defense, but I feel like that's a lot to replace if you can't find a way to resign him. I just don't think it's very likely. It's probably going to ask for too much money.
So let me ask you this. Listening to your response, would you prefer a back in the draft, or would you prefer to have Antonio Gibson back?
It depends on what round and how, like Antonio Gibson's market contract versus what round we're potentially taking a running back. I'm a big believer in Antonio Gibson. If we can fix the fumbles, I feel like he's just been severely underutilized. I think he could be a matchup nightmare in this Kliff Kingsbury system, especially with a potentially mobile quarterback with a big arm. I mean, that's going to be like the last of your worries is Antonio Gibson. You're going to worry about all of these deep shots we're going to take just because of the air raid system, the mobile quarterback, and all of that. Antonio Gibson will be able to feast in that. So, me personally, probably leaning more towards Antonio Gibson for what his market value is, like 3.5 a year. Especially with us, we need to go edge rusher, free agency, and by like second, third round of the draft. We need to address linebacker in both. We need to go O-line as much as we can. So I think you go ahead and just bring back Antonio Gibson. Maybe get like a 6th or a 7th round guy running back, me personally.
Yeah. That's interesting. That's an interesting take. And then the second question, what are your expectations for the upcoming season and why?
I mean, it's easy and safe to say just be better, but I think we could honestly put together a good enough roster to maybe make the play. I'm not expecting number 2 overall pick to win in division and win in a playoff game like the Texans. When you say expectations, it gets a little scary, but I think there's a realistic chance that we could make the playoffs. I feel like the division is up for grabs right now. We'll see how everything plays out. But at the very least, going from 4 wins to at least 8, I feel like we should, in my opinion. I feel like at least 8.
Hey, Rico, hey, you scaring me, bro, because you sound like if this offseason goes really well, you might be thinking, hey, we can make the playoffs this year. I can see you leaning there already. You leaning in that direction already because you were already like, yo, I'm all in. I'm gonna be talking Super Bowl here shortly. So you know, if they kill it this year in free agency and the draft, and you feel really good about what they've done, I can see you upping that total a little bit because without even knowing what they're gonna do, you already at 8.
Yeah, so, let's get it.
Let's do it. Hey, Rico is all in. Let's get it. All right, I see you. Hey, really appreciate you, Chris. Thank you for the super chat. King of the Bluegrass. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Who writes? I was surprised Rico didn't pick a Georgia guy. He can surprise you sometimes, man. You saw that fastball coming. He threw you a curve. That's what he do sometimes, man. You know he gonna rep the Bulldogs all day, every day.
Yeah, I love him in college, but at the end of the day, Commanders come first. I got to. Much as I love my Georgia Bulldogs, I was a Commanders fan first. It's in the family. I'm like the only Georgia Bulldog fan in my family. I was raised a Commanders fan, so whatever best suits them. If it's both, great, but Commanders priority. I'm sorry.
Got it. Red Wings 01. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Red Wings writes, always great to see Mount Rushmore together. What's your one UFA of yours you each would bring back? So kind of had this one already, but one, I think we had 3 earlier. Give me one guy you would bring back, the one you would bring back the most.
I think it's got to be Curtis Samuel. The problem is like supply and demand. I think there's a lot of good receivers in this draft that you could, if Curtis Samuel goes, you probably wouldn't really miss him too much. But I feel like he's just such a perfect fit for what Kliff Kingsbury wants to do. I can see Kliff Kingsbury. I know Adam Peters is running the show, but I can see Kliff Kingsbury calling Adam Peters every morning. Like, you sure about Curtis Samuel? Like, you sure you don't want to do that? Just being as pesky and annoying as possible to just keep that in Adam Peters' head. Yeah, all right, man. Just appease him. Go ahead and give him Curtis Samuel. He'll move out our way.
You know, that's an interesting one for me because to me it's only really 3 guys. Like Gibson you could toss him in there, but it's really Curl, Fuller, and Curtis Samuel for me, the 3 that need to be back. Obviously there are other guys that, you know, Joey Sly, bring him back. You know, if you want to bring in competition, go right ahead. But, you know, Jeremy Reeves, there are a bunch of dudes but when we're talking about the big, you know, needle movers, I think Curtis Samuel probably is at the top of that list. You know, I'm a big Kendall Fuller fan, but we'll see what they decide to do, you know, with this secondary and what the direction they ultimately move in, whether Kendall Fuller's a part of that or not. But with this offense and how well Curtis played last year, and like you said, the unpredictability of what you can do with him in this wide open offense, I'd love to see Curtis get an opportunity to play here in this offense. But to your point again, there's some depth in the draft, and you may be able to get a cheaper, younger option, and so they may go in that direction. Metaphor, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Metaphor writes, Super Bowl 58. Who you want to win? Who is winning? What you got, Rico?
I'm rooting for the 49ers. Who is winning? I think Kyle Shanahan will finally make up for that Super Bowl failure that he had with Dan Quinn. So I'm rooting for the 49ers, and I also think they will win as well.
This is a big. Kyle got to get this one. If you don't get this
Got
one,
to.
I don't know if you're gonna get it, bro. This is the one. This one feels like the one. Got a young enough team that he can get back here, but this feels like the one, right? His staff is being poked and prodded at. They're pulling away a lot of his help. Like, this feels like the one, right? You better get it now while it's there to be got. Red Wing 01. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Who writes? Okay, I realized someone already asked that. My bad. With Larson and Gates being UFAs and Stromberg unproven, do we try to find the center in free agency or the draft? Rico, do we try to find a center, or do we? I'll say this, and then I'm gonna let Rico tackle this. Stromberg was your 3rd round pick last year. You got to find out if this guy can do it or not before you go and draft another guy and invest another resource in that position. Gates is still under contract. I think you have to explore Ricky Stromberg before you go investing more draft capital in the center position. What says you, Rico? This is reportedly a very deep offensive line draft class where you can find talent, especially on the interior. Do you think they need to pull the trigger on a center in free agency or the draft, or should they roll with some of the guys that they already have?
Well, you already know my boy Cedric Van Pran. I'm really, really hoping we find a way to get him. I don't care what round it is, but I completely agree with you that, like, even just to add to it, we just have so many bigger needs. Like, we kind of have needs, you can argue, across the board, every position group. That's right now. But there are certain needs we need to prioritize more so, especially, again, edge rusher, linebacker, all kinds of stuff, DBs, because, I mean, I'm not sure how likely we are to bring back like a Kendall Fuller or anybody like that. And then we still got to see what we have in Emmanuel Forbes. Benjamin St. Juste had an off year. So I feel like we have bigger needs, and it may just be more worth it, long term, to just go ahead and let's roll with Ricky Stromberg. I mean, you could argue maybe he wasn't worth that 3rd round pick, but the previous regime did spend a 3rd round pick on him. He showed flashes at guard more so than center as the offseason went on, and then he had to play sometimes in games, come in late and things like that. Strategically, it makes more sense to just let Ricky Stromberg go. But Cedric Van Pran, as a Georgia Bulldog fan, I'm already worried about, like, how are we going to replace him? I think he was just so important, so underrated, that I feel like we would be lucky to have him.
And what round would you think would be a great time to pull the trigger on him?
I think he makes it to the 3rd round somehow. You sprint to that podium, but I'd be willing to take a 2nd round pick on him because I think he's that guy. I think you pick him, you don't have to worry about center for the next 10 years. I think he's that caliber center, in my personal opinion.
We'll see. This next group may not love Ricky Stromberg, and we don't know, right? But we'll find out. And like, to your point, and I think this is a great point that not a lot of people have made, they might have reached on Ricky Stromberg. He might, you spent the 3rd round pick, so you feel almost obligated to give him an opportunity. But what if Adam Peters said, I had a 6th round grade on Ricky Stromberg in San Francisco, right? So you don't know, right? You don't know. Zoe Life, no life. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. I got a bone to pick with you, Zoe. All this time, you had me saying your name wrong. And shout out to Grande Groove for correcting me. Why you ain't say something, man? You got me out here looking crazy in these streets for all these years calling you the wrong name, man. Anyway, are you guys surprised with how the 2021 quarterbacks turned out? So that's Trevor Lawrence, obviously Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Justin Fields, Mac Jones, etc. That's that group. How do you feel about them now that we've had a large enough sample size to kind of gather our opinions on what we think those quarterbacks are?
I mean, that's a tough one. Like Mac Jones, I was like, yeah, he's gonna be all right. He was just surrounded by elite talent in Alabama, but I didn't think he was that good. Zach Wilson was always a worry because it was like a flash in the pan. And even though I was a big Trey Lance fan, a lot of people kept bringing to my attention. He played with like 11 games in college before he got drafted.
That's right.
But I mean, I'm still pretty surprised, especially with like Adam Peter, how great that 49ers team was and how average Jimmy Garoppolo was, that they couldn't find a way to get Trey Lance to succeed. Now, granted, there was some injuries involved as well, but I thought they could somehow find a way to make that work. And then Trevor Lawrence has been great at times. He looked like what people thought he would be at times. He just hasn't been able to do it throughout the course of a season. So I guess there's that surprise. A lot of people were treating him like the next Andrew Luck. He hasn't necessarily been that. He's been great. He's been really good, but he hasn't been that. And then Justin Fields, I mean, he was raw coming out, you could say, and this whole Ohio State quarterback stigma. But he's had flashes, so I'm not sure if it's as much surprise, but it is a little bit of like a disappointment. I was hoping that at least one or two of these guys would be like guaranteed like super hits in the draft, like you couldn't miss type of things. And it feels like honestly really nobody is like that except for kind of Trevor Lawrence.
And you could argue that even he hasn't been that. He's been good, but not as good as people probably thought after that freshman year at Clemson, right? So I'm shocked at how that class turned out. I don't know why. I probably shouldn't be, because anytime you get 5 quarterbacks taken in the first round, usually at least 2 of them turn out really good, right? You had the 2018 draft class that featured Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, Josh Allen, Josh Rosen, and then Lamar Jackson as your 5 guys going in the first round. And as we know, Lamar, Josh Allen, and Baker to a lesser degree, but they turned out to be at a bare minimum solid NFL quarterbacks, with the latter or the former 2 being excellent quarterbacks. So 3 guys turned out to be pretty solid quarterbacks in that group. And I was thinking at least 2 of the 5 would have been really good, maybe 3. And we've gotten really just 1 of them right now to this point in Trevor Lawrence. So I am a bit surprised. I was a massive Zach Wilson fan. I got sucked into that whole BYU thing and his talents and what he could be at this next level. And then I was a big Trey Lance guy, but I was aware of the 1 true season as a starter, and I did think that was a bit of a question mark. But to him just not being able to stay healthy has been his biggest downfall. We really never got to see what he could be in that Kyle Shanahan system because he never stayed healthy. And so the jury's still out on him, but I think we kind of have a good read on the other quarterbacks in that draft class. And I'm shocked that none of them other than Trevor Lawrence has emerged at this point. And there's still hope for Justin Fields. We'll see what happens with him this offseason and where he ends up if he doesn't remain in Chicago. T-Roy, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, I heard Dan Quinn brought an NHL hat. I'm just saying. Hey, look, man. I probably couldn't give him an NHL hat if he would take it from me. He probably, if I could get to him, he probably wouldn't take it from me at this point. But he did give him some love, right? When he was talking to
Scott Abraham.
He gave him a little bit of love, right? But a lot of fans pointed out, he was doing the diplomatic thing. He's not going to say anything bad about Sam, clearly. And just giving a little love to his quarterback that's already here. But, that's not going to stop them from taking the quarterback. He didn't have to say nice things. He could have gave a standard and run-of-the-mill answer. So what was your take on that interview or that answer, rather, that he gave Scott Abraham in regards to Sam Howell?
Yeah, I'm right with you, because he easily could have just said simply, yeah, we're still looking at the quarterback situation. Yep. We're early in the process, kept it at that, smooth. But he went into like how Sam Howell can throw off the run and things like that. I don't know if this is just in case type of situation, just trying to make sure he doesn't burn that bridge. Right. But I don't really think it means that much either, no matter how you look at it. Yeah. I think he was just being nice, like you said.
Yeah. And I'm upset because we never got to get to the press conference with the other 2 fellas, but it was interesting in the presser when the question about quarterback was asked. Dan was about to say something, and Adam jumped in front of him and was like, yo, let me take this one. And he was like, well, we just got here. We just got started. We really haven't discussed the quarterback position. That was a lie, right? That was him pretty much saying, we're not going to discuss that, right? And then for Dan to then go and talk, to Scott Abraham, he didn't say anything crazy, but I think it's still more than Adam would like him to say, based off of the answer that he gave at the presser. I think that they really just want to not say anything in regards to the quarterback position.
Yep.
Kind of reading the tea leaves there. DeCarlo Coley, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. DeCarlo writes, does the hire remind you of Norv Turner hire back in the day? I've referenced that. The hire of Adam Peters does remind me of that. It does, because Norv was the hottest thing smoking. He was the hottest coordinator that you could get at that time. He was coming off of second consecutive Super Bowl title as the offensive coordinator in Dallas. And we were just 3 years removed from our Super Bowl, title. So it's not like we had sucked ass for 15 years at that point. We were thinking we were going back to win another Super Bowl here shortly. We just needed to get the right coach. And Norv was supposed to be that. So the Adam Peters hire more so than the Dan Quinn hire reminds me a lot of each other. Barrett Downing, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. My guy BD writes, does Allen get traded? Thoughts? What do you think about that, Rico? Does John Allen, we've heard him, recently have some things to say. Seems like he's cooled off since the season ended. Not in the same headspace that he might have been at towards the end when, the emotions were still rather high and hot. What's your read on Jonathan Allen remaining in Washington or not?
Yeah, I definitely feel like it's probably a 180. I think he was just frustrated, tired of losing, and maybe he was one of those people, like a lot of fans was hoping that Ron Rivera would get fired mid-season, and it was just like, he's still around. Like, I'm sick of this. And yeah, I've thought about it. He said 1,000% thought about being traded. But even then, as frustrated as he was kind of like, yeah, I've thought about it, but, maybe I'll tough it out. And I think now with an entirely new regime, and just based on how optimistic everybody seems, I mean, because our defensive passing game coordinator, Jason Simmons, that we just got from the Raiders, he made a lateral move to come here. And I just feel like a lot of people are kind of looking at our situation like, man, this could be something great. And I think Jonathan Allen, especially being a hometown kid, probably wants to at least give this regime a try and see how this goes.
I couldn't. I don't even need to add to that. That's the perfect way to say that. I think he feels totally different now than he did then. And I'll just leave it at that. I think you said everything that needed to be said. Red Wing 01, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Who writes, I know Jaden is looking like the more popular opinion, and I really like him. But if you draft May, there's a little fundamental difference between him and Sam. You can run all the same plays / installs with them. What is your sense about Drake May and the continuity that you may be able to keep intact? Now, granted, it's a totally different staff. There's not a lot of holdover and carryover to what you were doing a season ago. But to your point, if they do have similar skill sets, you don't have to change the offensive scheme. Should one go down, the other can come in and you can run everything that you were running with the previous quarterback. What says you about Drake May? Do you like him as a prospect? Do you think that he is the better option at 2 over Jaden Daniels, or would you prefer Jaden? And I think you kind of answered that earlier, having watched him in the SEC.
Yeah, I maybe a little biased, but I do prefer Jaden. But I would be very happy about Drake May at 2 overall as well. Like, I'm happy with either of the 3 guys. It's half. I really believe in this coaching staff. I think when we're doing comps and we're talking about ceiling comps, we're talking about floor comps, the worst they could be, the best they could be. I think with the coaching staff that we're building, I think we can start to lean closer to what their ceiling could be, if anything. They may not absolutely reach it. Like, a lot of people compare Drake May to Josh Allen. He may not be Josh Allen, but I think he'll be something great and something closer to a Josh Allen than to a failure, what some people believe, just based on, because I believe in his coaching staff. Then the other half of it is I do like Drake May's talent. I think there is something to that. both Sam Howell and Drake May came from an air raid system in North Carolina. And then, like, yeah, if there's an injury, there will be a seamless transition to Sam Howell. I don't think that's necessarily the best way to look at it. Like, I don't think Adam Peters is thinking, let's draft Drake May just in case he gets hurt. We can go to Sam Howell. We can call the same plays. I think you go into it just assuming that the quarterback will be healthy.
Right.
But I like Drake May's talent. I think even just isolated from Sam Howell and all of that type of stuff, I think he could be great. The thing that worries me about him, like with Jaden Daniels, I'm worried about him not throwing on the run and getting hit too much. Drake May just misses wide open receivers way too much for me. Like, it's just like, what is that? I don't know if it's mechanics. Sometimes it's mechanics. Sometimes it doesn't even seem like it's mechanics. He just straight up misses guys for no reason. And I think that will have Kliff Kingsbury pulling out whatever hair he has left in his head over stuff like that. But I would be happy with either of three quarterbacks. I like Drake May the least out of the three, but that does not mean I'll dislike Drake May.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest red flag for me of the three quarterbacks is just the flat out misses with Drake May. I hadn't really studied him, and then I remember Mel Kiper Jr. putting out his first mock and what he had Washington doing it too. And he cited some of those games at the end of, the season this past year for Drake May and how they were just misses in those games. So I went and took a peek see, and they were some bad misses, man. You're just going like, bro, there's no pressure. He's open. What are we doing here? Right? Like, you can't miss that throw. So I don't know, man. I think accuracy is something that you got to have at the NFL level. You can't afford to miss when you got guys open. That's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Haval, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Haval writes, why is Mayhew still here? Knowing AP from their San Francisco days is not a valid excuse. He was Ron's right-hand man and second in power in shaping his talentless roster. Now he's second in power to AP as assistant GM. Haval, I get the frustration, my man. Check this out, though. In this league, it's a boys' club. We know this to be a fact. AP talked very glowingly about his time in San Francisco with Martin Mayhew. And you can go back and watch any interview when he was with San Francisco, and he talked about his upbringing in the game, and specifically his time in San Francisco. And he talks about Martin Mayhew and the impact that he had on him. So you had to know that Mayhew was going to be here. He's not going to fire his boy. However, similar to Brian Johnson being here, and this is just my take, and we'll get RICO'S in a second. Similar to Brian Johnson being here, he's not making the selections. He'll be a part of the process, but ultimately, it's Adam Peters' show, right? So, again, I feel good about that. I understand what you're saying, and I don't love a lot of the selections that he made, and so I can get why him being here is a problem. I wanted everybody gone at season's end, including Mayhew and Marty Herney. So I get it, but Adam Peters is in charge, and until he gives me a reason to believe he's not in charge, or he's not making decisions, or he's not making smart decisions, I'm gonna err on the side of, hey, it's all good, man. We straight. It's all good. What says you, Rico? What says you?
First of all, I completely agree. The only thing I can add to that is that you typically don't just come in and fire a whole staff that's been doing all of the homework on the draft for you already. That's why he said we're going to keep the scouts for now. Martin Mayhew's part of that as well. Maybe they're gone after the draft. That's when teams tend to fire people like that. But at least through the draft, all of the tape that they've watched, all of the scouting they've done, going to games to physically be there with them, that information is kind of invaluable at this point. You can't just throw that away and try to bring in a new staff that could do that immediately. So I think he at the very least stays to that point. But again, back to your point, Martin Mayhew is his boy, and he's not going to have anywhere near enough power to potentially ruin things. I feel like this is the Adam Peters show. He's just kind of here to kind of give him like, okay, maybe you missed this guy. Let me throw that name in there. Let me throw this opinion there. But at the end of the day, it's Adam Peters' show, point blank, period. And also, Louie Tee, just to let you know, I'm gonna leave in like a couple of minutes, maybe after the next question. Appreciate you.
Hey, I appreciate you, man, for the time, man. Thank you so much for joining me. Rolando Cedeno, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Rolando writes, This group of wide receivers were not good this year at separating. The 49ers have shown that drafting the quarterback without a good line would be a mistake. Draft the blue chip, which we don't have on this team, Marvin Harrison Jr. Keep it up. So he doesn't think that Terry, Jahan, if Curtis is back, Curtis, all those guys can be true separators. Curtis was probably the one guy that consistently separated last year. There were spacing issues, obviously, that we watched, but what's your take on these receivers? Do you still think that these guys are true separators?
I think they can be used in the correct way, because I feel like some of it was on them, but I also feel like a lot of the reason that a lot of us are ready to move on from Eric Bieniemy and go to a next defensive coordinator was that we saw at times wide receivers were in the same spot. Now, of course, we're not in the film meetings, we're not in the huddle or anything like that to know exactly why. But I feel like it happened enough to where we could probably blame Eric Bieniemy for a lot of it. Because even one of the touchdowns that I think Jahan Dotson had, him and Terry ran the same exact route. They were in the same place. I don't even know how that wasn't intercepted.
Yeah.
And I just feel like with a better system, of course, Kliff Kingsbury is going to run a lot of 4 wide receivers. These guys are going to see one-on-ones all of the time. So I feel like even a receiver that can't necessarily separate that well is going to get open in a system that Kliff Kingsbury is running. So I don't feel like we need to prioritize route runners that much. It would be nice. It's a great thing to have, but I feel like we're good with the guys that we have. Just add a little bit more to it, but I don't think we need like a Marvin Harrison Jr. to make this offense work and to be functional, to be consistent, to be on time, ahead of the sticks and things like that. I think Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, Curtis Samuel will be just fine as like your top 3. Get some more guys under them. We can make it work.
Hey, man, I appreciate the time as always, Rico, man. You keep doing your thing. I can't wait to see the next mock draft you have. You keep pumping those out. It seems like every other day we get a new mock draft. And so I'm always intrigued to see what tweaks you make based off of, this coach or this philosophy or, so looking forward to seeing the content, man, and continue to grind, bro. I appreciate your time.
Yes, sir, man. Anytime. Let me know, man.
Hey, no doubt, man. Appreciate you. Take care.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, no doubt. So now it's just little old me. I will finish out the rest of these supers. Y'all know how we do it. We're going to get to the very bitter end. Shout out to all of the Commander Kings that blessed the program tonight. And I'm looking forward to chopping it up with those fellas once again in the near future. So Jason Fios, thank you. And sorry to any super chats that were, including the rest of the panel, and we didn't get to it in time. Y'all know how it is. Everybody's got things to do. Everybody doesn't have the same schedule that I have and the time that I have to be here, all night long. So I apologize to anybody that supered with the anticipation of getting to, the entire panel. And I tried to get to the supers a lot quicker. I didn't actually know how much time we would have together with the entire panel. But with that said, I'm going to knock out all of the questions and, so forth and so forth. And so, Jason, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Who writes, talk about how all the coaching hires cover definitions for each other, how some are strong in some areas and others are strong somewhere else. I think that's a great point. And that's what coaching is all about, right? Like, you're supposed to have guys that, like, to me, we didn't have specialized enough roles. And not that every team in the league has specialized roles, but I do believe that there's a such thing as having too many cooks in the kitchen. But I also think that you don't want to stretch some of your coaches too thin, right? So I love the fact that you have a pass game coordinator or a defensive pass game coordinator or an offensive pass game coordinator, an offensive run game coordinator, a defensive run game coordinator. And that's what they do, right? I love that Joe Whitt Jr. was just the defensive. He was the defensive backs coach as well, secondary coach, but really he was just the pass game coordinator, defensive pass game coordinator for the Cowboys, right? And he allowed Al Harris to coach the DBs. So Yes, he was hands-on. Yes, he was in those meetings, and yes, he was in the film room, and he was really getting on those guys about their technique and things of that nature. But his thing was focusing on how can we get the most out of this pass game defense. I love that their centralized focus, that they can take these guys and say, hey, you don't worry about anything else but this position group right here. You don't worry about anything else but figuring out how we can stop Buffalo's passing attack. You don't do anything else but worry about how we can stop Buffalo's rushing attack. We had Juan Castillo here last year. Juan was coaching the tight ends. Juan was helping out with the offensive line. Juan was also, quote unquote, the run game coordinator. Like Juan was doing so many different things. And oh, by the way, none of those things turned out to be all that great. Now, the run game wasn't terrible. If we would have run it more, I think there could have been more success, but none of them were great because I think he was being stretched too thin, right? I like that this group is coming in and they're being very specific and intentional in what they're doing, especially Quinn with his hires. And I'll take it a step further. Remember, I said I don't want to see Dan Quinn parading a bunch of dudes from Dallas or Atlanta, in his first stop or here. Like, go out and get a bunch of diverse guys. And that's what he's done, right? Yeah, there are a few guys from his past that he knows, but he's grabbing guys from everywhere, This doesn't feel like when Ron just essentially bought the entire crew from Carolina to Washington. Now, granted, there wasn't any time for everybody to disperse and find jobs all around the league and then have to reach back and try to grab them like it was for Dan. Dan was a coach in Atlanta, 3 years ago, and this is 4 years now. And so everyone had to go find work. So now it's harder for him to say, hey, let's get the band back together because everybody's got jobs in different places and you don't know if they can shake free or not and come work for you now. But I just love the fact that he's never worked with Kliff Kingsbury before, but he went out and got him, right? Joe Whitt Jr., yeah, he worked with him the last 3 years, last year in Atlanta, but he brought him with him, right? I love that he tried to bring Al Harris with him, and of course, Dallas blocked that. I love that he tried to go get Dallas's tight ends coach to bring him to Washington to be the offensive line coach. Dallas blocked it, of course. But I love that he was, going out to, the Raiders and trying to go get their defensive pass game coordinator to bring him here in the same capacity. I love that he's reaching around and grabbing different guys from different places. One of my favorite inquiries right now, and I hope he ends up being here, is Mike Adams, who is the assistant defensive backs coach in New York with the Giants. I remember saying about 5 or 6 years ago, this guy is going to be I think he's going to end up being a defensive coordinator and maybe a head coach one day, but he will definitely be a defensive coordinator at some point. He's, to me, got that Chris Harris type of rock star ability. I see it. Listening to that guy talk, Mike Adams was a veteran in the back end of his career as a leader in Carolina and in Indy, and he started doing media work while he was at the back end of his career, and you could just tell he was very articulate. He was a smart football player, which is why he hung around in the league so long, and he was made to do what he's doing now, which is coach. And I'm telling you, this dude has a chance to be a star, and bringing him in to coach the secondary, if he in fact ultimately gets that job, I think it'll be an awesome hire. If you can't get Al Harris, I think Mike Adams is going to do a hell of a job coaching up the secondary. So they're doing some really good things, man. I'm really liking what they're doing right now, but we'll see what happens. Jack Miller, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Jack writes, thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Jack writes, what up, Lou and Rico? You are the two best for this question. Do we keep Kerrigan developing into a coach? I don't know if he's going to remain on this staff. I haven't heard anything about Ryan Kerrigan continuing to stay on as in any defensive line capacity. That's interesting because we haven't heard that he's been dismissed. But then again, we didn't hear about any of the coaches being dismissed other than Eric Bieniemy. We just assume that with a new staff, until they're until we hear that they're retained, my initial thought is you've all been relieved of your duties. That might not be fair because like Tavita Pritchard, he's here, right? But innocent until proven guilty. I'm going with fired until proven that you're still here, until you're proven to be retained. So the way I view Ryan Kerrigan is until they say, hey, no, you good, Ryan, you can stay, he's gone. That's how I'm going to view him here. So I don't know if they continue to develop him as a coach or not. I think he is a guy that the players gravitate towards. Some of them were here when he was a player. There are not many of them left now that Sweat and Young are gone. It's just Duran probably and Jonathan who played with, as they call him, RK. But I think there is some value in having a guy like Kerrigan around, and maybe he gets to continue to grow as a coach here. We'll see. Obviously, I don't know if there's any harm in keeping him around as a defensive, an assistant defensive line coach, but they may have another guy in mind for that position. Who knows? As far as CMC's brother possibly being a punt return or a wide receiver, I have no idea what Christian McCaffrey's brother is up to and how good he is or isn't. Again, I'm just cracking open the all 22s for college football. I literally just started today. So that process has started, but I haven't delved in that deep to where I can start talking about guys like Christian McCaffrey's brother. So sorry I wasn't more of a help for you there. Wilfredo Elias, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, Hall of Fame finalized. No Antonio Gates. Crazy. Hashtag HTT Kings. Wow. I'm shocked that he didn't get in. How does Antonio Gates not be a first ballot Hall of Famer? That's stunning. If what you're telling me is true, that's stunning. He'll get in, but I just was assured mentally watching this man's career that he was a first ballot Hall of Famer. But apparently I was wrong. G's winning. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Who writes, running back in the 5th round, Ray Davis, curls, braid bro out of Maryland, or Key Davis out of Georgia. There are going to be some running backs. I want to see how fast this group is. I remember last year being blown away at how skilled the group was last year. They weren't the fastest group, but they all could catch the football. They all had quickness. Tajay Spears was a great example. He went to Tennessee, had a really solid rookie season out of Tulane last year. That's the kind of guy that was in the draft last year. Not super fast, but very skilled, right? Quick, could catch. Some of those guys were ready to come in and be pass protectors, day one. I want to see if there's more speed in this year's draft class at the running back position, which is what we need. And if there is, hopefully we can find one of those guys like you just mentioned back at the end of the draft, day 3, and find a gem, right? That's what Adam Peters has had a track record of doing, finding and unearthing gems in day 3 of the draft. That's what we need him to do here in Washington as well. Lang Hughes, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Lang Hughes writes, Daniel's style has never won big. May prototypical. Well, there's always a time for things to change now, isn't it? And, somebody's going to break that mold. Somebody's going to do it. Why not Jaden Daniels, right? We'll see. You pair the quarterback with the right coordinator in the right offense. The NFL has been and always will be about fits. Can you find a way to find the right fit in the league? Tom Brady went to the perfect place for his skill set, the perfect team, and the perfect coaching staff. It was all about fit. And I've always said, had Tom Brady ended up in Cleveland with the Browns, or had he ended up a Jacksonville Jaguar, he's not Tom Brady. But because he ended up in New England with Bill Belichick, with Charlie Weiss, then ended up with Josh McDaniels, he became Tom Brady. You know, this league is built on fits schematically. Are you somewhere that accentuates your strengths and minimizes your weaknesses? That is so important in this league. Jaden Daniels may end up somewhere where his skill set is nurtured, cultivated, and then he's able to be the best version of himself and continue to grow as a quarterback and maybe end up being dynamic in this league. Who knows? I can tell you this, Patrick Mahomes was unconventional and teams didn't win with quarterbacks like Mahomes. And then Mahomes broke the mold. We'll see what transpires with Jaden Daniels. But to say, well, quarterbacks like him don't win and just cast him aside, that, I mean, you're not giving a guy an opportunity to prove that he can get it done. I'm always a firm believer, and I'm going to give you every opportunity to prove that you can before I say you can't. I've always been that way with tackles that everybody just assumes is going to kick inside the guard. I've always been that way with, you know, corners that might be safeties at the next level or receivers that might be tight ends. They're probably right, and you're probably going to have to make that transition. But I'm going to give you every opportunity to prove them wrong, right? To prove that you can do it. You know, I was that way with Sam Cosmi. Everybody assumed Cosmi would be kicked inside the guard. That would be his best position in the NFL. Okay, let me see if you can play tackle or not. If you can't, kick you inside the guard. That's what ultimately happened. Got no issues with it, but I'm going to give you a chance. And I think Jaden Daniels deserves that same opportunity. Kevin, the PRF. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, if we sign Kirk Cousins back, it would be bad for the Commanders, but even worse for the weight of Louie Tee's soapbox would destroy the internet. I wouldn't be pointing my finger at the fan base and telling them how ridiculous they've sounded all these years for, you know, Kirk not being able to win, you know, this or that, or garbage time stats. We've heard all of the false narratives on Kirk Cousins. It would be really interesting to see that 360 that would have taken place, because Kirk left here confident he could go and win somewhere else. He went to Minnesota. They thought he was the missing piece. Clearly he wasn't, but he played well for them. Their defense got worse. They were one of the better defenses. As soon as he got there, their defense took a hit, and they never really recovered. It'd be funny to see him come back to DC. I'll just say that. But it's not happening, so you don't have to worry about that. Twin D, I know this. I'd get in a lot of arguments probably with fans about Kirk Cousins because there's a lot of people that just can't stand Kirk Cousins that are in Washington's fan base, and I'd have to be beating them off with a stick. But I'm glad I don't have to do that because he's not coming to Washington. Twin D, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy, Twin D, writes, the thing I love about this foursome is that a question can be asked to the four of you and we'll get four different answers and insightful responses. Always a must listen. And that's why I love having these dudes on and vice versa, going on their channels and things of that nature, because we all have, although we're fans of this team and have been for various amounts of time, we have four different vantage points. And yes, we've all suffered the same, but we still have different lenses. Like, for instance, Rico's like, bro, I'm ready to talk about winning the Super Bowl already. Well, that is definitely not my take. I'm preaching patience and perseverance, right? Well, he's talking about to hell with that. I'm trying to do what Houston did last year. We may not do it, but that's the route I'm taking. And I'm not mad at him for that, but I don't want that to be the expectation. But I can't tell that man how to feel. And so, Rio is more of cautious optimism, but, he's talked himself, just like we all have, into, hey, this shit's gonna work, and then Ed's kind of like, yeah, I don't know about this, right? So we're all it's the same thing, but we're all kind of at different stages of acceptability of everything that's happening. Rico thinks, hey, we about to go to the moon with this shit. Rio's a little bit behind him, but I think in second place, Rio's like, yo, let's get this shit on, bro. I'm ready. I'm like, yeah, I think this is gonna work. This might have a chance, right? Squeaky voice, and I think this could work. And Ed's like, I don't know, man. We'll see. Right. So and that's why you gotta love it, because we see it from 4 different lenses. King of the Bluegrass. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. King of the Bluegrass writes, Rico, would you take Powers Johnson over Van Pran at center? I wish we could have gotten to that with him. With the excitement that he talked about for Van Pran, I don't think there's any chance he would have taken Powers Johnson. But everybody's got Powers Johnson as their number 1 center in this year's draft class. But Rico sounded like he was all in on Van Pran. So I think Rico would have stuck with his guy, with his guns. But who knows? He might have surprised you. Red Wing 01. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Red Wing 01 writes, shame we may not get to see Khalif Hudson and Dan Quinn's defense, especially since Rivera refused to use him. He would make such a great fit. And I've been thinking about that, about where he could fit in all of this. And I said, this is the perfect hire for his skill set, because Dan Quinn would definitely look to utilize a Khalif Hudson. If he's using a guy like Marquise Bell, a former safety turned linebacker who was like 205 pounds, Khalif's size would not be an issue with Dan Quinn. He just would love his speed and quickness and athleticism down around the line of scrimmage, which is what I've been saying all along. When you watch the tape of Khalif Hudson at Michigan, his best work was down in or around the line of scrimmage, down in the box as a blitzer, run blitzing, going after the quarterback, being a nuisance around the line of scrimmage. A lot of TFLs in his final year at Michigan, and we just never utilized him in that manner. And it was frustrating because I'm like, you don't have any package that you could just put Khalif Hudson on the field. There has to be a package where you go, we got to get this guy on the field, and it just never was. And so I thought that Dan Quinn would be, a godsend for a guy like Khalif Hudson, and he still may be, but him being a free agent, it may not fit. Adam Peters may be like, nah, I got a guy for that. Don't worry about it. You don't need him. And it would have been nice to see Khalif get an opportunity, but it is what it is at this point. Chris Hunter, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Chris writes, who will be the number 1 wide receiver for Washington next year? I say T. Higgins. There's no way that T. Higgins is the number 1 receiver here next year. And I feel confident in saying that because Cincinnati's not going to let him go. They're going to franchise tag T. Higgins. I firmly believe that. And when it's all said and done, you got a better shot at getting Mike Evans, who I want no parts of either, than you do T. Higgins. I just don't see Cincinnati letting him walk. Now, that's not to say that ultimately he won't get away from them, but I don't think he gets away from them this year, is what I'm saying. I think there's still 1 more year of T. Higgins in Cincinnati, whether he likes it or not, with a franchise tag, and then he may be able to move on next year if they can't reach some sort of deal. But I see them trying to keep that nucleus together for as long as they can, and I think this will be the last year that they'll be able to do that. Kevin, the PRF. So, of course, Terry's my answer for that. Kevin, the PRF, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Who writes, NHO hat is still good. Spoiler alert, LT is going to be on Super Friends, recklessly yelling at everyone. We have the best QB room in the division. I'm not going to do that this year. I'm working on myself, man. I'm taking self-help classes. The last Super Friends stream was unbearable because me and LB were yelling the entire time. And I vowed not to do that anymore. I'm not going to stop, trying to get my point across. But us yelling back and forth like that was not how you draw up one of those episodes. So I'm going to be better. If I have to take the high road, then I will. I'm gonna have to bite my tongue a little bit, which is tough for me. That is not something that I like doing quite often, but I will be better. I am not going to argue that we have the best quarterback room because we don't have a proven commodity in our quarterback room. So I can't make any crazy statements like that because Dallas, you say what you want about that. He is a regular season quarterback, but at least he's got the credentials. Jalen Hurts didn't finish up the season the way you would like him to. The turnovers went up last year, still had a runner-up MVP under his belt, went to a Super Bowl, probably put in the greatest Super Bowl defeat performance we've seen from a quarterback. And you got to give that respect, and it's just due. Now, I'll argue up and down probably that our quarterback room is better than the Giants, but that doesn't matter either. At the end of the day, they suck ass just like we do. And so you're not going to get that out of me. I'm going to behave myself the next time we get on one of those streams. And I'm not going to I'm not going to show my ass. I'm going to act with class until they give me a reason to show my ass. Then and only then am I going to let them have it. But I'm going to fall back a little bit because, it doesn't matter what I say. This team has to back me up. I don't have a lot of ammunition right now. And we got swept by the division, and so they're going to constantly throw that in my face, and I can't do anything but take it. We went 0-6. We got swept by the Giants last year. Like we can't say anything to anyone. One of the first things Dan Quinn has to come in here and do is he's got to win in the division. We have to be more competitive in the NFC East before we can start talking about winning this and winning that and winning double-digit games and winning the division. You got to win in the division to win the division. And I think, people have constantly asked the question, what is a successful season? Well, one of the things that I'm looking for in year one, right out of the gate, is that we are much more competitive in this division, period. And I'm not talking about, we almost beat the Eagles or, we were hanging tough with Dallas for 3 quarters before it unraveled. No, we need to beat some ass. I'm tired of losing to these teams in the division, and at some point I'm ready to start sweeping these bastards. Not the whole entire division. I don't expect that, but I expect us to be able to start sweeping Dallas with Dak, not only in seasons where Dak is injured and doesn't play. Like, I expect us to start beating Philadelphia and looking for the sweep and not just going into every season. Well, I'll be happy with the split. F that. No. I want to bust their shit. I want to bust Dallas's shit, and I want to sweep both of their asses and be looking at the Giants like food too. Like, we got to get to a point where we're not afraid to go into Dallas, or we're not afraid to go into Philadelphia. I've always said, of all of the division road games, that Philadelphia is the most sterile for me. And not that it's not an environment that they make hostile. It's just we never have had issues playing in Philadelphia. We just never have. We've always had success in Philadelphia. And even if we lose, it's competitive. We can go back a long ways, and Philadelphia has never been a house of horrors for us, but the Meadowlands has. Dallas has been. So I just feel like we got to start getting to the point where we can start winning consistently in the division. That's the first order of business for Dan Quinn. Get us to respectability back in this division. Frank McLaughlin, my guy, Frankie baby. I gave you a shout out earlier for the support with the Cash App Dono. I really do appreciate you, man. Thank you so much, Frank. And in case you didn't get that shout out earlier, I'm do it again, man. I really, truly do appreciate your generosity. Thank you so much for holding the kid down, man. I can't begin to tell you how much your support and all of you guys' support out there that continue to bless Louie Tee Network with all the resources that you pour in, whether it's financial resources, whether it's time and energy, because look, there could be a million things you could be doing. A lot of you multitask when you listen to my show. If it's a long stream like this one is ultimately going to be, and you're doing, multiple things, whether you're at the gym or you're on the way to work or you're on the way home from work or whatever the case may be, or you're at work working with an earbud in or something. I can't thank you guys enough for the time, the sacrifice, the energy, as I mentioned, the financial resources that you provide the Louie Tee Network with. Without you guys, this does not exist. So thank you very much. And Frank, you're one of the guys that I really can truly say I truly do appreciate all that you do for the Louie Tee Network. My guy, Frank, thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Greatly appreciate you. Frankie Baby writes, Lou, aloha. Says, I always liked Devin White. Do you think DQ could bring him back to his previous self? He might be a steal if he can. That's the type of shit I'm on right now, Frank. I'm going to be honest with you. Like, everybody's overlooking him. Everybody's leaving him out there. The dude can still run. It ain't like he forgot how to play football. There are some things that, you got to go and you got to vet, right? And this is the resources that you should have to be able to get to the bottom of what went wrong in Tampa, right? Yeah, he's a freelancer. Yeah, the effort was questioned, yada, yada. Okay, can we get past these things or not? Because I know one thing Dan Quinn can't get with is a dude that lacks effort. I'm there too. I can't deal with the non-effort, right? If there was a reason for that, and there should be no reason for that, but can we figure out, because that kind of athleticism, that speed is elite. When Devin White uncorks that 4.4 speed, you see it. Okay? He is a blur on the football field when he opens up and runs. I don't know. He might have ran a 4.3. I think he was a 4.4 guy. That kind of speed at linebacker is unmatched. Okay? If you can get this dude to screw his damn head on straight, and I think Dan Quinn can motivate him and get him to play the kind of football that he's capable of playing, I would love to take a flyer. And I think this is the perfect time to do it, because in the past, it would have cost you an arm and a leg to get at Devin White. His stock is so low. He got benched. They decided to play, Brit over him at the end of that season. His stock is so low right now. You can get him for a song. You might even... It might be a 1-year prove-it deal, but whatever. I'd love to take a flyer out on Devin White. With that kind of speed and Dan Quinn's diabolical way of utilizing guys, I'd love to see him in this defense. And I think you can get him on the cheap. I'm all in. I'm right there with you, man. Frank, we are like, a lot of people asked, there was a super earlier that was thrown to the panel about 3 linebackers, and Ed was reading off a list on the computer in front of him, and you could tell that Devin was down that list a little bit because people have soured on Devin White. And I love Frankie Louvu. Frankie gives you maximum effort on the field, and I think that's what drew him to that. First of all, Frankie's a better athlete than people give him credit for, but Frankie plays 110 miles an hour all day, every day. He plays like his hair's on fire. So that's what, that's what's going to draw you to Frankie Louvu when you watch. Devin White, though, is a different animal. And if you can get him to tap into what makes him great, man, he could be a steal. He could be a steal. But, we'll see. There are questions, and when there are not enough answers, I tend to stay away. And there are a lot of questions surrounding Devin White right now. And, there are a lot of questions that you don't want to have to ask a football player either. But if the answers that you get from those questions are good enough, if they're satisfactory and the money isn't too outrageous, just because we can afford it doesn't mean we need to do it. If the money's not outrageous, sign me up. Sign me up. Red Wings 01. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Red Wings writes, Keanu Neal 2.0 is exactly what Khalid could be with DQ. Tight end is another big need. The free agent class is pretty meh, and the draft class besides Bowers and Sanders. A lot of people also like the Ohio State kid as well. He's not my cup of tea. He's big as shit, right? He's a big dude. Not the athlete, but he catches every damn thing. But he's not my cup of tea necessarily. But at the end of the day, people are really minimizing the tight end's role in this offense. I think that's a mistake. I've said this before. At the very beginning, when Kliff Kingsbury first got to Arizona, they had Max Williams and a bunch of tight ends that he wasn't all that enthused by. And so he would run a lot of 10 personnel, and he wouldn't put the tight ends on the field a ton. When they got Zach Ertz, that changed, and he started throwing the football to the tight ends a ton more. And the targets for the tight end position went up. You saw a lot less 10 personnel, a lot more 11 personnel. And so I am of the mindset that you could see them bypass tight end if they don't put the level of importance on it that we are putting on it. I hope that they put the amount of importance on that position, because if you want to create a mismatch the quickest in the NFL on offense, the tight end position is the fastest way to do it. Point blank, end of discussion. It's not a coincidence, if you ask me, that the 4 teams that made it to the championship games all have dynamic tight ends. I don't think that's an accident. And the Ravens had dynamic tight end play even without Mark Andrews, because of what they were getting out of what's his face from Coastal Carolina, who's playing out of his gourd. So I think you got to have one of those dudes in this league. And I think the guy's name is Cade Stover from Ohio State. Anyway, I think we need to draft a tight end. I mean, there are going to be some available in free agency, but I always like to find something young and cheap in the draft, and we'll see if we can get that done or not. And I still have hope for the tight end that got hurt last year. I always blank on his name, but I still have hope that he can come back and kind of pick up where he left off. Last year was devastating for him, because remember, when we got him, he was just converting to tight end. He was a college quarterback. Amani Rodgers is his name. He was just converting to tight end. That was his first year. So all of the experience that he could get was invaluable. And for him to get injured in his second year, as we were very excited and he was really starting to hit his stride, it's a bit of a step back for him. So we'll see what he's able to do. In Sean Washington, yes, Isaiah Likely is the tight end for the Ravens. Thank you for that. And Keanu Neal, I think, I don't know. Keanu was definitely used as a linebacker for Quinn, physical presence. I don't know if Kalik is that, but, you know, I'd still look at him as more of like a Marquise Bell, even though Bell was a lot taller and longer as a defender. Pause. I don't know. Keanu Neal, he was a different animal too. He was so physical. I don't know if Kalik is that physical. Keanu was a physical dude. Hunter Hodovic, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Hunter Hodovic writes, "Sup, T? Sup, Hunter? Bro, I've been on YouTube for 5 seconds and have already seen 2 videos. A poll for us to trade for Fields, giving up Fields giving up a second. Did I miss something? No, you haven't missed anything. You're going to see a lot of that. And I've told you guys to be careful. There's going to be a lot of that out there. I'll say this. The past few years, we haven't seen teams wait until draft day to make a big move at quarterback, particularly, or in the draft for that matter, at 1 or 2 or 3, as we saw in 2021 when we saw the 49ers come up to number 3. if you're going to make a move in the draft at 1, it's going to happen prior to the draft. It's not going to happen on draft night like it used to. If you're going to move Justin Fields, it's not going to be on draft night. It's going to be prior to the draft, like we've seen in the past. Like, I don't anticipate this thing stringing out and the Bears keeping everybody in suspense. Once they get a good read on Caleb Williams, they talk to him, they go to the combine, they see him, they get to sit down with him for the first time. They go to his pro day, he kills it. They talk to him some more, and they really get a good feel for what this kid is going to do. And it reciprocates the want to be in Chicago. I think you're going to see them trade Justin Fields. That's what I think. If they get any sense that he doesn't want to be there, that there's hesitation on his end, and they don't want to deal with his dad, et cetera, and they realize this kid's head is not where it needs to be the face of a franchise. And I don't think that's going to be the case when you get to Caleb Williams. Like, this guy's a gym rat. He's a football guy. He loves it. He's been doing this since he was a kid. He's been trained to be an NFL quarterback. I don't think they're going to have any issues with his work ethic or anything like that. It's really going to come down to, does he want to be in Chicago? And I saw an article today written based off of a response that was given by, oh man, somebody on Radio Row sat down. It was a prominent person that would have Caleb Williams's ear and his group's ear. And I don't remember who it was. I don't know why I'm blanking on that person, but they sat down and they said, bro, if you go to Chicago, do you understand what they would do for you if you won there? Some people took it the wrong way. Like, some people took it like, do we got to convince him that Chicago's a great city and he should want to come here? Because if that's the case, we don't want him. And I'm like, get out your feelings. All right. He's an East Coast kid. He went out to the left coast. There's a lot of opportunities for someone like himself on the left coast. He grew up on the East Coast. The Midwest is cold. He likes warm weather. There's a lot of reasons why he might not love Chicago. He may need to be sold on the fact that Chicago is where you need to be. But I'll tell you this. If they get a sense that he wants to come to Chicago, they're going to trade Justin Fields. I totally believe that. Totally believe that. So you haven't missed anything. You're going to see a lot of polls. You're going to see a lot of people talking about Justin Fields to Washington. And, you know, I've seen things where, oh, you trade a second for Justin Fields and then you draft Marvin Harrison and you pair them, you know, those two Ohio State products together and all kinds of nonsense. I'm not falling for the hype. I'm not buying the hype. I'm not, you know, subscribing to any of that stuff. Ultimately, I still think the Bears are going to select Caleb Williams #1 overall. And Washington is going to have to do their homework and their due diligence on the other two quarterbacks and select the one that they think has the chance to be the future Hall of Fame quarterback, the guy that has a chance to be a 7-time All-Pro, the guy that has a chance to be an 11-time Pro Bowler and a 3-time Super Bowl winning championship quarterback, right? That's the guy that they need to select. We'll see if they're able to do that. But I digress. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie Tee, here on this Commanders Kings episode. It was a lot of fun having those dudes on. We talked about the different emotions that everybody went through in the process, and it's been a wild ride. I wish we would have had more time to get to the press conference. I really wanted to dissect that, but it was so much that we needed to talk about first before we could get to it, and we never made it to the press conference. I would have loved to have seen how they reacted to everything in the presser. There were so many, you know, I've already gone through it, so you know how I feel about the press conference. And I wanted to ask them about Josh Harris. We've kind of talked about that, I think, on RIO'S channel when Harris first took over, but he's a guy that I get a kick out of him, watching his facial expressions. And I'd be wondering, what is Josh Harris thinking right now? You know, his body language, his mannerisms, his the way he speaks, what he says when he does speak, how he talks. You know, he's definitely got a personality. That is for certain. He's definitely a dude you could go get a drink with and kick it and have a hell of a time, right? Anyway, I would have loved to have talked to them about him as well, but I digress. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie Tee, here on the Command Post. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. You guys have a great rest of your evening. We'll be back tomorrow with the Louie Tee Network podcast, breaking down pretty much the entire podcast will be dedicated to Super Bowl 58. So if you're interested in that, join me. If any new developments with this team come up, you know I will be. You'll see this face invading your space talking about the burgundy and gold. There are a lot of developments. So stay tuned. We have a lot of guys that are being, they're requesting interviews for, and they're doing a hell of a job of trying to fill up this staff with credible teachers. That's exactly what we need. Coaches that I think have a chance to come in here and really change the dynamic, change the culture, if you will, in Washington. It's going to feel like a different building because it's going to be a different building. Anyway, I digress. You guys have a great night. Take care. God bless. Good night.